Hello and welcome all to election night in America. We are now looking at the polls that have just closed in the state of South Carolina, 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. We have a few things to quickly set up here, but we wanted to make sure we were live as soon as possible. So here we have the polls have just closed. Again, not a single bit has started coming in yet, but that is, in fact, the start of election night right there with polls in South Carolina. So, here we have a few contests that are coming up tonight, and so quickly I'm just gonna, the main races that are happening tonight. We have a few more primaries across the country, but the main ones. I mean, there's only a few. There's only so many that are actually really happening that have any, relevance. And so one of the first big ones is, of course, here you can see in South Carolina, and South Carolina, this is the Republican governor's primary. This is where Nancy Mace is currently running. Pamela Yvette as well, and Alan Wilson are the main three that I think really have any shot. Yvette is definitely the one who is leading, though. I believe she's lieutenant governor as of right now. And so she definitely has the lead as far as that goes. I do not have the Democratic primary because it's not necessarily... This is more or less the general election. Trump won South Carolina by 16, so it's not necessarily to a point where there's much shot that... And so, clearly, as you can tell, they're taking a little bit of time. There's nothing surprising, but I mean, it's literally only been 7 minutes. We set up the next countdown here today. At the next polls that close are at 8 o'clock. So there we are. And I need to figure out why clock is a little bit off. Like the cropping is off. There we go. Okay. There we go. Okay. There's that done, ready to go. So, next poll's closed 52 minutes from now. We don't have anything in yet. I don't know what's going on exactly with Maine. There's this one random... I'm guessing this one random precinct in this one specific town that got a little excited and ahead of itself and decided to report. There's really not much to it. 2 to 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 to 1. So, honestly, it's not enough of anything to actually, nothing yet. Literally nothing yet. It's not enough of anything to really glean basically anything for this race, though. But again, name recognition would be Angus King III, who is the son of the Senator Angus King, who is also former governor. And so that would be interesting to see if that was able to carry on from there. Then we have also the... the Maine House second, I guess, is technically... Oh, they might be getting overloaded now. Come on. There we are. All of them are from Matthew Dunlap, which is interesting. This is for the Democrats, though. Jordan Wood appears to not be doing too well. And, of course, it crashed. So, hello and welcome if you're just coming in. The polls have just closed in South Carolina, and, I believe... No, it's just this page. Alrighty, cool. Hopefully they will get that fixed. because the page itself is not working. So, as of right now, no, looks like there's something up with the site. The counties, there we are. We're looking at still all zeros. For South Carolina right now, we are still waiting for the polls to close in a few other states. It is currently 7:10 p.m. on the East Coast. We have just under 50 minutes before the polls close in a few other states. And so, generally speaking, we're just waiting on the primary for South Carolina governor for the Republicans. The Democrats, it's not too important of a race to be looking at here. And then also what percentage of the primary vote Lindsey Graham will be receiving tonight. If he gets below like 60%, then that would definitely be a very interesting thing to see. And then, of course, South Carolina U.S. Senate, Annie Andrews is heavily favored there. But last week we saw a very big surprise in the in a primary contest with Randy Feenstra losing. So, obviously things are still possible in big upsets, but yep, it's gone now. So it's probably an error and they got rid of it. Yeah, polls in Maine actually close. Oh, all of them are gone. Polls in Maine close at 8 p.m. on the East Coast. That's the one that we're waiting for next. We also do have North Dakota, which closes at 9, and then Nevada, which closes at 10, and I believe that's all the ones that are really happening tonight. Maine, North Dakota, Nevada, South Carolina. Yep, those 4. So not a super huge night tonight either. But yeah, this isn't going to be anything as absurdly powerful as we saw on Midterm Super Tuesday or on March 3rd even, where it was just Texas and also North Carolina and a few others. So all right. Maybe not for a little bit now. Welcome to everyone who is, if you're just joining us now, we're looking at currently the South Carolina results, which have not started coming in yet. 0% in for all of these contests. We're still waiting. We do have remaining vote estimates now, and so for the Democrats, oh wow, it's actually a lot up in Greenville County. But Charleston, Richland is a lot more so in these southern counties, right? Beaufort, these areas over here, Greenville actually is huge. You also have some northern regions in like York, which is right across from Charlotte. That's more of an exurban county. Horry County, absolutely. Lexington, which is suburbs and exurbs of Richland, or Columbia of Richland County, and the likes. This is a pretty open stream. There's not too much to focus on, so if any of you have any questions, feel free to ask in the chat. It definitely gives me something to do, something to look at while we're waiting for more polls to close. And so if you have any questions or anything, want me to look at any races, because there are a few more happening tonight. It's statewide in South Carolina, so there's house contests that are happening. There's also the same in Maine and basically everything else. So North Dakota happens later tonight, Nevada as well, South Carolina, Maine, North Dakota, Nevada. So, I mean, I don't know, I should probably pick up B. Webster. Jermaine Johnson's probably favored here. He might be a little bit oversampled in the Polls closed. We are still waiting on any results from the state of South Carolina. We are waiting on the polls to close in Maine. That is that timer down on the bottom right corner. 44 minutes and 41 seconds left until the polls close in the state of Maine. I think I'm probably going to get rid of that icon and maybe like bump everything else down because there's, oops, that's the wrong button. I meant to do that, and then there we go. Where exactly is the icon in respect to everything else? Okay, so if it's actually a little bit high up. So if I slide the clock, or the countdown over here, if I want to move, that'd be great. All right. Bear with me here. Okay. No, why does it do that? I don't understand why it does that. It moves the entire thing. When I slide stuff up and down, that makes no sense. Okay. And then we have... Alright, so South Carolina still holding up on some votes. They don't have anything yet. Still not close to as bad as California is. But, I mean, it's... You know, I don't like any of this. There we go. Let's just leave it. Maybe I'll overhaul it for next week. I probably will. Yeah, that's just gross. Alrighty. Well, honestly, as of right now, I don't see any reason to have any strong opposition for the prospective nominees in any of these races. As of right now, we have still a pretty strong expectation that the crazy. Yeah, more or less, we're just waiting on this. Now, we're basically expecting Jermaine Johnson to be the nominee for South Carolina governor. Here, Pamela Yvette is definitely favored. Then I'd probably bet Alan Wilson is probably second in the leadership here. Then we have for the Senate, the person who is favored the most is Annie Andrews, who is likely to then run against Lindsey Graham, the incumbent senator here. But he may end up struggling overall in the total amount of vote that he ends up getting tonight. How low this number of his could end up getting could be somewhat interesting. We'll have to see how that goes once they start reporting their results. And so, honestly, it could end up being a very interesting contest to see how low this may end up going. But personally, I don't see Lindsey Graham getting to any point where he'd actually have to be concerned. The only person tonight that I think has a political career on the line that will probably be ending tonight is Nancy Mace. She is retiring from her first district, which is more or less like this area of Charleston, to run for the governorship, and she is likely to not even make it in the primary. Most likely, Yvette is going to easily win. I think they have one of those weird primary systems where if the winner gets over like 35% or whatever, kind of like South Dakota, except it doesn't have to do with a yeah, whatever. Anyway, picking back up from there, we're looking then at Maine governor, where we have Angus King III with the highest name recognition, the son of the current Senator Angus King, independent that caucuses with Democrats. And then we also have Hannah Pingree, who I forget where she's from. And then Ralph Shaw, who actually is the former head of the Maine CDC. And then we have Troy Jackson and Shanna Bellows. Honestly, I think that Angus King III is probably going to end up winning just from name recognition, but there's a chance. As of right now, Rob Shaw has actually been leading the few polls that have been done in this area. I'm not 100% sure as far as that goes. Oh my word, that's actually a name. Penobscot Nation voting district. That's dumb. That's why that's entirely connected in the what on earth, Maine? What is wrong with you? And then we have for the Republicans, who are likely to not win this November. Jonathan Bush, of course, is the name recognition. Yes, son. That he is in the Bush family of the two former presidents. Bobby Charles is probably going to do relatively well there. They have Robert Charles to win. Yep, not surprised. I think he was winning like the one poll that was done there so far. And then we also have in the U.S. Senate. This is for the Democrats. Almost certainly Graham Plattner is going to end up winning. You end up having, I mean, he's a relatively controversial candidate, obviously, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's not going to win the primary tonight. Then you go to the second. Okay, apparently no, they will not let us. That's still not working. We go to North Dakota. Vorchak likely to win. Honestly, I don't see necessarily what the primary challenge here is about by any specific metric there, but oh well. And then we have Nevada governor. Aaron Ford, very likely to win this primary. He's the attorney general of the state of Nevada. He won statewide by like 7 on the same ballot that Lombardo flipped the state to Republicans on the gubernatorial level in 2022. He actually won all 4 congressional districts in the state, including the Republican PAC one in the northern part of the state. And we also look at the second House district. This is the northern one here, where you actually have a retirement. If we look at the House, you can see Amadei actually is retiring 19-point margin, but that is against 2 independents and a libertarian. So you kind of have to take a little bit of salt there. But Democrats are open to be able to potentially contest this in a relatively blue year, because you do have the Democratic strong-ish areas of Carson City and also Reno on the western side in Washoe County. And so that may end up being enough, with reduced Republican margins across the rest of these counties, may be enough to actually get them a victory in this district. Very large Democratic field. It appears that Benitez Thompson is the betting market favorite. And then you have also on the Republican side, hoping to hold on to this relatively Republican district there, you have quite a field here as well. So relatively large primary fields for both sides as of right now. And but still looking at South Carolina, we do not have a single vote in yet. So definitely a bit slow to count tonight. We are basically in with half of the half an hour done. And so more or less, yeah, it appears that Nancy Mace basically believes that she is done. She, in a post, said, if you are in line, stay in line, which usually is not a very good sign for candidates to say. But, you can't... Oh, I was on poll closing. I don't know. So... All right, so basically just waiting on South Carolina. We don't have anything out yet. Still, they are apparently taking their time tonight. I mean, I don't know why they do this, but potentially they took California's slow counting as a challenge. So, I think we had a first big dump. There we are. There's some numbers, and I'm not necessarily sure where they're from, but we do have some numbers in. Not for the Democratic governor though, but we do have some for the Republican governor here. We have basically squat in so far, but from Newberry County, Alan Wilson is leading currently with Norman and then Yvette. And for the Senate, we do have Annie Andrews, but only ahead by the slightest amount here. Now we have some more coming in. Lawrence County, Chesterfield, and Darlington counties reporting so far. As of exactly right this moment, we can see that they are, you know, nothing insane. We're looking at like less than ish 1% in South Carolina. That is in fact going to be Lindsey Graham right there. That's not surprising though by any metric. So that is in fact going to, be status quo. So more or less that is going to be the main story there. Lindsey Graham doing relatively well, not surprised. Annie Andrews starting to pull ahead there. I doubt that even Darlington County is going to hold, just based off of the very fact that we have almost anything. So that's basically it. Honestly, it's not much to be able to say, right? But it's still something. We do have South Carolina starting to trickle in finally. It took a while, but we're now starting to finally see some movement there from South Carolina at the very least. I mean, we don't have any other states with polls closed. Lindsey Graham, not surprised there. Jermaine Johnson easily going to probably win the nomination for the Democrats there as well, but that was not at all competitive by any means in the slightest. So, that would have been an upset if anything else had happened, more or less. But Annie Andrews, Alan Wilson actually leading right now. Oh, look at that. The odds for Pamela Yvette just took a tank in the last minute and a half. Isn't that insane? But yeah, Yvette's doing pretty well in the northern parts and the central parts that have a little bit more, I believe, like more black population stuff. Alan Wilson's actually doing relatively well. Again, that's going to be a bit more of an interesting focal point of the general electorate for Republicans. It's not going to be, a very important point, at least for a little while, unless you get more. Oh, there we go. There's a. Oh, never mind. That's like nothing. Okay, Pamela Yvette is starting to get some more votes from some larger areas. We still have a lot remaining in a lot of these. A lot from Anderson still. A lot from Horry County and Charleston. Horry, Charleston, and Lexington are probably going to be the ones really making the choices here. Also a bit out of Greenville and York, again, as we said a little bit earlier, but there's really not that much coming in as of right now. Still, it is pretty early in the night, and it's a little too early to really make anything huge in this race right now. But yeah, there's not much to be said for these other contests. As of right now, I don't think there's anything super surprising, other than maybe like Graham's margin here is going to be a little interesting to watch. He's currently at about 64.5%, which is relatively about where I'd expected he'd be resting at, maybe a little bit lower than that. So if anything, that's actually good for him. But essentially, all right, well, down to about half an hour before the polls close officially in Maine. That little report is gone. The U.S. House 2 page is still broken, which is awesome. Pamela Yvette appears to be doing relatively well so far based off of the current results. She's on track to be able to win without too much difficulty. There's a lot of vote left, though. It's going to be, again, down to Greenville. It's going to be down to York. It's going to be down to Horry. It's going to be down to Charleston. It's going to be down to Lexington. Those 5 are the ones with the largest vote sinks for Republicans, the biggest bubbles. I mean, you also have a bit in Beaufort, you have a bit in Lancaster, you have a good bit in Pickens. But the fact that she's doing pretty well up in this northwestern corner, where you also have Greenville, is generally going to be doing pretty well as far as that goes. And it appears that Wilson's doing well along the Black Belt areas like Darlington, Hampton, Newberry, Lawrence. If that might insinuate that he's going to do pretty well in Richland and Charleston counties. Potentially Beaufort as well, but not so much Horry. That's more affluent white voters. So that may be something that more Pamela Yvette ends up doing better with instead of Wilson. And it's probably going to essentially end up being just a fight between those two specifically. As you can see, the main chunk of the state here to really differentiate who's going to do well with what hasn't quite filled in yet. And also, even these counties that have started coming in yet, they have relatively low. Then you're talking about like a third in, a quarter in, 1/5 in. That's not atrocious. It's just not, to the level of being able to help anything. And Anderson literally has like nothing in yet. I mean, Josh Kimbrell could be winning this right now for all we know. It's just a low enough sample size that we have no idea what's actually going on in the quarter. In Oconee, Pamela Yvette is doing pretty well there. That's probably going to being a strong county for Yvette at the end, and that's going to be one of those larger sink areas there. But there we go. Myrtle Beach coming in, 19% in, and Pamela Yvette is cruising to victory there. So she's going to be doing pretty well with those affluent white voters, which means she might do pretty well in Charleston. Most of the minority vote in Charleston is, in fact, for the Democrats. So if you do have the rest of Charleston, which is more this, like, the rest of the county, which is like up here into this area, and also down on the southern end, most of the Democratic vote is in like North Charleston here up to Somerville, sort of area. We can pull it up on the 2024 Vote Hub map. And so as we're looking at the Charleston, not West Virginia, Charleston, South Carolina, not the municipality, the county. There we are. Charleston, South Carolina, you can see here, it goes up a little bit into these northern regions. You have these more affluent white suburbs. These are the areas that are going to be probably a lot more for the Republicans, and they're not going to net as much out of places like North Charleston, the southern area around Folly Beach. These areas are going to be a bit more Democratic, and they're not going to have as many Republican votes. But this area, this white affluent area, which is the majority of what Charleston County is for Republicans in their primaries, is probably going to be going for Yvette as well, considering how strongly she's doing in Horry, which is basically like the exact same sort of thing as that area. It's right here. It is very, very Republican. There are only a few precincts in here. The outer Conway area, a little bit of Myrtle Beach proper, just 2 right there. Bucksport, you have one in North Myrtle Beach, which is pretty small than Loris. Other than that, it is entirely a deep red county. Again, that's affluent white voters, very well off. This is going to be an interesting county to watch, though, in 2028 because of that affluent white vote. It could fly to the left. Not 100% sure about that in its entirety. But if we look again here, 38.5 for Trump to 33, that is a 5-point shift. That's about how much the country moved as a whole. So it appears to be roughly stagnant. That is a 4-point shift to the left, which is also about how far the country moved. So it seems to be a relatively strong tell, which is interesting because South Carolina in and of itself is also a very strong bellwether state. It is almost completely stagnant on the country as a whole. If we look at the shift, 16.25, it flies a little bit to the left in 2012, but then it resets and goes to 16.33, and then it stays right about there, 16.14 and 16.39. It is almost completely staying put. And so if Horry County within South Carolina is also pretty stagnant, this could be like the only county that you need to poll in order to figure out the national environment, which would make things pretty interesting. But if it continues to be this interesting, dynamic here of where it is these white affluent voters, I'm not sure where the rest of the vote is. It doesn't have the demographic thing anymore. I thought it used to have like a way that you could see. There we are. White voters, you can see basically everywhere. Black voters in this area, you can see even in some of these areas in Horry. Hispanic voters, roughly the same. Asian, roughly the same. But if you look at Hispanic and Asian voters, you can see very, very few in this area. But it's these affluent white voters that every single precinct, oh my word, almost majority, vast majority of them in South Carolina even are Republican. Again, as you can see here, even in North Charleston, most of them are here, but this is where the bulk of it is. If you look at the black voters in this area, they are very, very Democratic. You can see there's a lot more in this area here in North Charleston. It's a very heavily black populated area. So that's probably going to end up being the story out of Charleston County whenever that starts coming in there. That's going to be another one of those big sinks there. You still have a lot out of Myrtle Beach, 28,000 votes. But you still have about 30,000 out of Charleston and 38,000 out of Greenville County, which appears to be the biggest number that we have left. Nothing reporting out of there yet. And for the Senate, we currently have Lindsey Graham sitting at about 65% of the vote, which is right about where he wants to be at this point. Well clear of a runoff situation there in the state of South Carolina. And so that's going to be important for him to be able to project strength going into November. If he does poorly enough, then honestly, he might be at a little bit of risk. I mean, not necessarily to any point where it's, going to be concerning. I think that, honestly, as of right now, if we look at the Senate and wrong sheet, if we look at the expected national environment, in order for South Carolina to flip, you'd have to look at least a 13-point shift to the left from where it is right now. So, Lindsey Graham's a bit of an underperformer, so maybe like an 8-point shift or so, or 4.3 based on the expected performance. Wow, okay. Or 7.8. So somewhere probably about a 6-point shift to the left from where we are right now, which would be a D plus 15 national environment. So, again, not necessarily quite the, the general, generally speaking, it's not going to be a very close contest, no matter what happens, really. She did officially win the nomination. That is basically done and dealt with at this point, but it's really not going to be any level at which it's going to happen. But yeah, at this point, Nancy Mace is not going to be the next governor of North Carolina. She's not getting enough of the vote anywhere. It's between Yvette and Wilson. So basically, Okay, there's Hampton, really nothing coming in yet. Still don't have anything out of Anderson, and there is a huge drop out of Charleston. Wilson's actually doing pretty well there. Looking currently at a relatively large drop for him there. If I had to guess, maybe it'd be this northern chunk. Again, we're looking at those minority voters. Things along those lines might be going a little bit more for Wilson. He appears to be favored amongst the black belt here in places like Darlington County, doing relatively well in Kershaw and Chesterfield, also in Newberry and Lawrence. If he starts leading in Richland County, that'll basically confirm my theory as far as that goes. But also looking at Hampton County, that's another one that's going to be pretty important as far as that goes. But Charleston County, if that's actually these outer regions, especially this northern chunk right here, which is where a lot of those Republican votes are going to be coming from, then maybe that isn't going to actually be the correct takeaway from that. But if it's actually from these northern regions, of course I can't tell. I don't have a way to look at precincts. But if it is from those areas, then I'm not 100% sure where the what groups they might be looking strong with. But it appears that Wilson's doing relatively well with these minority voter areas here. For the most part. And again, we still have the lion's share of stuff out of here. Charleston is like 30% in, but we still got a lot out of Horry. We still have the majority out of Greenville, out of York, out of Richland, out of a good chunk out of Aiken and Lexington. We just had another drop. I'm not sure from where. It looks like Cherokee County, where Norman is actually leading. Yeah, a good bit more out of Anderson. We actually have legitimate votes out now. It was like 7 or something like that, just like a minute ago. But yeah, so that's definitely going to help as far as that goes for being able to see how well, because if she's doing really well here, this is a very heavily white voter area up in the northwestern corner of the state of South Carolina. This is kind of left trending, specifically Greenville County is going to be a little bit more interesting to see over the next few cycles. Horry County, same sort of thing, but not quite the same. It's actually more heavily affluent, and it's more urbanized. It's red because of rich voters, not because of ex-urban voters, which is what it's more so up in the Greenville and Anderson areas. Pickens and Oconee are just rural. So. All right, now we're looking again at the... That's weird. Anyway. All right, well... We're looking currently, again, at some more results coming in here. We have some from Berkeley, which appears also to be along the Black Belt. The Black Belt is this entire chunk right here, maybe minus a little bit of the edge of Georgetown, a good chunk of Horry, though they do have a few black heavy majority precincts over on the west, the northern strip right there. And then also chunks out of Beaufort, Jasper, this whole area here, all the way out to like Edgefield. And then it kind of cuts over a little bit there, Richland, Newberry. So you can kind of see that with the precincts. You can see this strip of blue across the state. It's not very uniform, but I mean, yeah, if you look at the orange share, you can see that it's very heavy in quite a few of these precincts. But this entire chunk here is essentially the Black Belt. You have this chunk up here where it kind of like fades out in Virginia, right up about here, but it keeps going down into this area right here in North Carolina, and then it also continues off from Fayetteville, going all the way down, jumps up through Columbia area, continues down there, Augusta, all the way across Georgia, and it kind of cuts off here and avoids most of Horry County down through that area. And so this entire chunk here is more or less the Black Belt, if my computer will load it. There we are. You can see that the black voter is actually very close second. If we include the Charleston area, then now actually it jumps up a little bit. A lot more Hispanic and Asian voters in here, actually. But you can see that they are a very close second. If I was a little bit more careful and didn't include these guys, then it's not what I did. But anyway, yeah, it was a relatively heavy black population, not like as extreme as if you were just to look at like central Atlanta, where they are barely not a majority. If you cut out some of this area here, then they're probably, yeah, now they're almost the majority. Yep. Now black voters are the majority in this chunk here. Just cut a few more out of there. So this is generally also part of the Black Belt. It kind of cuts off because it's its own secluded thing there. But you can see it does continue all the way across Alabama up here, and then it kind of ends. It almost T-bones, but it keeps going up and like arches upward through Starkville up into this area, and then it meets at the Mississippi River Black Belt along this area here, which used to be absurdly blue back in the Obama days, but has been deteriorating basically since then. And so you have an area like this, which is the Mississippi River Delta area. As you can see, again, only 150,000 vote lead for white voters in that area. And so, again, that's going to be, if you include areas like Jackson and some other outer areas right there, then I bet that black voters gain a little bit more. Yep. And so if you then include basically this entire stretch, which is probably going to completely freeze my computer for a solid minute, but it'll be all right. Then you will have a pretty good picture of where the greater black belt is, and essentially it's just this entire chunk here, which we're focusing on South Carolina, where we might have some strong minority voters. You can see there it is. It does not include Horry County. It does not include this area. These are wealthy white areas along the coasts of the Carolinas. It also does include a good chunk of North Charleston, where you have some relatively blue vote there from minority voters in that area. But you can see then it also continues up and also has a little bubble right here in North Carolina straddling the Virginia border. And so there you have 1.4 million black votes estimated by the model done by VoteHub for 2024. And it favors Kamala Harris, even though it's across the South by 4. So as you can see, very heavily minority population. It does include big cities like Montgomery, Memphis, northern areas of Durham and Raleigh, Fayetteville, which isn't actually that big, North Charleston, but other than and Columbia. But other than that, it doesn't take in any huge vote tank cities like Birmingham or Atlanta, even though those technically are. They're not part of the Black Belt, though, which is this exact strip right here. Of these majority minority, specifically majority black voter areas across specifically the South, back from the days of settlement due to slavery in the plantation era, from specifically the 1800s along the Mississippi River Delta especially, but across the rest of the South as well. And so that is how we ended up with this strip right here. The reason that you can draw two janky-looking lines from Southern Virginia all the way down to intersect with Tennessee and then cut down to New Orleans and have it favor Kamala Harris by 6.7% is because of slavery. The history of actually it's because of an old shoreline. Which definitely just goes to show how wild American history is. If you look at the black vote in this area, which is relatively high, it's about 88.7% to 11.7%. You can see basically every single precinct here is blue, which again isn't very surprising. This is a very heavy black voter dense area where you have, I mean, the black vote basically everywhere is very heavily Democratic, but let's pop back over here. We're looking at that's okay. Yeah, that's 4% estimated in. But now 15% in. Pamela Yvette is doing very well for herself there. Still looking and waiting for more numbers from Myrtle Beach. Nothing necessarily out of Charleston yet that has we haven't seen already. Spartanburg Reddy's doing relatively well. I'm not really sure where he's from. Yeah, the fact that wow, yeah, Mace isn't even like getting third place in Charleston County, which is insane because this is her district, the first district here, which is encompasses this chunk of Charleston. You can see it's more South Charleston, North Charleston up here. The Democratic part is in fact in Clyburn's district, When it goes down here, it encompasses these parts down here, cuts down through this area, and then cuts up and includes this big chunk right there, which is relatively Republican, more so than at least the areas around it. And then, so yeah, the fact that she's not even placing anywhere that strong in the counties in her own district, like Berkeley County is a relatively big one there, Williamsburg, she's not placing even third place in any of them. So it is well safe to say that Nancy Mace will not be the next governor of South Carolina. Her political career is now over. So, now we're continuing to look at the looking again at where Wilson's doing well. Okay, there's a little bit of an outsider there. Sumter County, it's a relatively strong black majority county, I believe, but it doesn't seem to be same sort of thing with Saluda. But these are a little bit more of the white area. Let me actually look it up real quick and find a map. No, that's not what I meant to do. How did that happen? Above. Population by county. Ow. Okay, this is absurdly small. See if I can find a better one. That is still absurdly small. Why are they so small? I want to be able to see it, please. Okay, like alone or in combination, sure, I don't care as long as it's not super... Oh, my word, this is huge. Perfect. Wait, how did that... Why did it duplicate this window? Okay. Did it duplicate all my windows? Why did it do that? Okay, sure. But anyway, yeah, this is the map that I was looking at. I'm surprised that Kings County actually isn't higher, and the one right below it is the one that's actually that high. But if we scroll our way over here and take a look, again, you can see that chunk right there. This is actually why this is a right trending area of Virginia right there. Then you have that northern chunk there. It then continues down this way. You can see this strip right here. It just kind of have a little bit of a brick. Oh, crap. I'm not waiting. And then you have the chunk down here. It does kind of stripe across, continues across there. And then you have the Mississippi River Delta area there going all the way up to about Memphis area. And then it kind of just stops. So again, this region of South Carolina is kind of where it appears that Alan Wilson is doing well. Other than Sumter County, as you can see right there, Sumter County is relatively high. It appears to be in a gradient. Now, Claiborne, Mississippi, 88%. They're all in Mississippi and Alabama. And then Petersburg, Virginia, randomly. Which I think is like that one. I don't know. I don't know my Virginia counties very well. And then top 10 by number, Cook County, Harris County, Los Angeles County, which is by far the most populous in the country, Kings, Wayne, Philadelphia, Dallas, King George's, Broward, actually interesting, and Bronx. Roughly 47 million, or 14.2% of the population, and it does in fact have actually a little gradient scale there. So we're looking in South Carolina in these regions to be about, what, like 35 to 50 and 20 to 35. So not like majorities in really any of these, but still going to be an important factor in them as we are coming up now on 5 minutes before the polls close in the state of Maine. So, Continuing to look at that, you can see the Myrtle Beach continue to grow there. I actually forgot to grab some water, so I'm going to be right back. I'm going to grab myself some water. Stay put. I will literally be back in like 45 seconds. All right, and so we're looking at, again, is going to be where is Alan Wilson doing well? So the problem with Alan Wilson potentially doing well amongst minority voters along this strip of South Carolina is that a lot of minority voters don't vote Republican. That is still something that is true, especially amongst minority voters in the South. It appears Ralph Norman has a relatively strong showing right there, specifically in the northern part of the state. Randomly Spartanburg, I don't know what's going on with Reddy there, but Lexington going for Wilson's actually going to go pretty well for him there, but Myrtle Beach is going to be probably down to Greenville for how strong of a margin it may end up going for Pamela Yvette. But as of right now, I would say Yvette is still favored. But anyway, if we're looking at the Pamela Yvette, there we are. Oh, her. Yeah, I know her. If we're looking directly at that, I don't know what's going on down there. That's just, yeah, there's still only like 6 votes reporting there. Why did it just sign me out? Dude, I literally just, whatever. I don't understand. Why is it doing this to me? That was obnoxious. I don't know what's going on with Allendale County, why literally only like 7 votes are reporting. But oh well, it's gonna be fine. And, alright, and so obviously, if he's really going to be capitalizing on that, I'm not really sure. Richland does still actually have a good few number of Republican votes. It's not necessarily enough, though. It's more out of Lexington, which is going to be a bit more suburban. If he doesn't do enough with white suburban voters, then he's really going to end up running into some trouble. But he appears to be doing okay with them, at least with looking at areas like Charleston County or, the like, with as far as that goes there. And so when we're looking at the specific, regions that they need to be doing well in, I think that, again, Yvette is still doing pretty good. She's not ahead by an absurd amount. It is still to the point where it could be up in the air, but honestly, it's still Yvette in the lead, and I don't know if it's gonna be a I mean, I'm actually surprised how poorly Nancy Mace is doing. She's sitting at like 11% right now. She's probably not going to be gaining basically anything. And I really don't know if that's insane. The polls have just closed in the state of Maine, and so it is too early to call anything as of right now, but it's 8 o'clock p.m. on the East Coast, and the polls have just closed in the state of Maine. Nothing has actually come out yet of that, but now we are going to be waiting to see how things go for Maine governor on both sides and how much Graham Plattner will win by. The polls have just closed in the state of Maine. The polls have closed in the state of Maine. So, again, looking at how, where these people will be doing well. Myrtle Beach, it's going to be down to Horry County for Yvette. If she starts struggling there, then that's a huge vote sink. If we're looking at the fact that we're probably having 22,000 votes left, right? We still have 38,000 out of Greenville that hasn't even opened up yet. So that's going to be a important source of votes for whoever ends up winning there. That's more than enough. I think that if Wilson starts doing well up there, then he could end up being the nominee. Same thing for Beaufort, which I'm pretty sure actually had some results originally. I think they probably retracted them at that point then. Looking at Richland County, 20-point margin for Wilson. Doing pretty well there, but again, not actually as many votes in as there are left in Lexington County, which is a more southern, suburban county. Relatively large amount of votes there. Again, Trump actually got more votes out of Lexington than Richland County. So... But yeah, Richland went redder than Lexington, or bluer than Lexington went red, but still pretty large vote sink for Republicans there. Almost completely cancels out Richland County by itself, which is pretty impressive. 89,583. 124,512. So apparently the turnout number is still very, very high for Democrats, more so than Republicans, which may end up proving to be a problem later this year in South Carolina, but I'm not necessarily sure it's going to be enough to carry Democrats over the finish line at all. It's going to be more so a problem across, if that holds up for the rest of the South, for its two neighbors, Georgia and North Carolina, both of whom have very competitive Senate elections in November, and Georgia has a governorship election, which is actually at risk of flipping blue. Same for the Senate election in North Carolina. Pamela Yvette is ahead by just over 2%, with about 1/5 of the vote in. No votes have come in yet in Maine. It's a fun little thing I threw together here on Tier Maker. Basically, I'm not 100% sure, but this is... hello to everyone who's coming in. We're still waiting on more votes out of South Carolina, and nothing has really come in yet in Maine. Make sure to share this if you have anyone else who's even, like, at all inclined for elections, or even if you're not at all. Everyone could really be a... Vote Hub 3 minutes ago called the second place for the general election in the California governor's race for Steve Hilton. So now we're looking at an important... Basically, we're looking at here as far as this goes is that now Yvette appears to be getting some numbers randomly out of this area here. I'm not 100% sure what this is about there, Claire. But, I mean, Lee is most of the way in, so it appears that maybe it's not specifically to do with the black belt there as far as strength for Wilson goes. Again, looking at these numbers here, you can kind of see an overlay still. There's a little bit of a drop in these areas, but, I mean, it might just be some slight regional appeal as well, or just some slight gain in some areas that haven't done otherwise. But, as I was saying, make sure to share this. Anybody should, I think everyone should be more in tune with politics. It's important. And so currently, though, we're looking at an AP projected 18 minutes ago that Steve Hilton will advance to the general election for governor in California, which means that it officially will be Xavier Becerra versus Steve Hilton. Becerra is very heavily favored in November. So we're looking at, again, is going to be the number. I'm just waiting on Allendale to finally get some things together up in the northern part of the state. Greenville has started coming in, and Yvette is leading. I think that's probably about it. You do still have Lexington, Richland, and Charleston, but there's just enough out of these areas of... Oh, okay. Of Horry and Greenville to basically cancel those numbers out. Plus, you probably have some of these other counties here that might be going a little bit towards her. But as of right now, I'm not sure specifically where things would go. And specifically... Specifically now, targeting these areas along here. These are going to be the important ones, looking at Florence, Marion, Dillon, Calhoun, Orangeburg, Bamberg. These are along the rest of the Black Belt. If Wilson can continue to do well along those areas, then he's going to be in a good spot generally as far as being able to maintain his own. But again, if you're looking at a place like South Carolina, where if with Democrats who are doing pretty well with minority voters still can't manage to get a win, then obviously if you're a Republican amongst that Republican electorate, which is very little black voters, you're not going to end up being able to secure a victory there just by running that up, which is why it's important that he's also getting the white voters in those counties in order to be able to actually perform there relatively well. We're still waiting on any results from Maine, but it has only been 7 minutes since the polls closed there, and we are counting down to 9 p.m., 52 minutes until the polls close, and that is going to be in the state of North Dakota. Polls officially closed statewide at 9 p.m., but some of these areas across the east have closed a little bit in some of these areas, but most of the rest of the state has not closed yet, and so we don't have anything officially out of there. But it's not necessarily going to be super competitive. Fedorchak is probably going to end up winning renomination, and it's easily going to defeat whoever Trygve Hammer is going to lose by like 30 points in November. It does not matter. I don't understand what these numbers are about at all. So it doesn't necessarily matter who ends up winning, even if Fedorchak ends up losing to Alex Balazs. Then whoever the Republican nominee is going to be the next U.S. House representative from the state of North Dakota. Looking at the U.S. Senate here, again, this is probably going to be Graham Plattner, but depends on how strong Janet Mills does. If Janet Mills can hold up something of her own against Plattner, even though she suspended her campaign weeks ago, obviously that will show a lot of Democratic discontent with Plattner, and that could potentially point towards a difficult time in November, which could hand things off to the Republicans for controlling the Senate, because Plattner flipping Maine is one of those big necessary flips that the Democrats are basically hinging their entire flip control of the Senate on. I'm going to pull up real quick here what the Senate looks like without Michigan. And so as of right now, I think it's relatively safe to say that all of these are going to be going one way or the other. But, nope. But some of these contests are still going to be South Carolina. Yeah, probably. These ones are the ones that are going to be relatively competitive. These 7 and 46-47, Democrats leading, but Republicans hold all of these, other than Michigan. They right now are looking at Michigan, which is probably going to be a little bit not competitive. Potentially give the Democrats just from the national environment, right? assume they do relatively well. Mike Rogers lost in a red year. Probably not going to win this cycle, et cetera, et cetera. But to the point where Democrats are expected to lose, they're not. The Democrat is not going to win Nebraska. That's an independent anyway. But then Turek falls short in Iowa, right? Tallarico narrowly loses in Texas. Now what are you looking at? Republicans can't win another seat, right? Peltola is favored in Alaska. Brown is very narrowly favored in Ohio. You need Maine, right? If you lose Maine, if Susan Collins holds on another cycle, which would mean that she is the only Republican senator in a state that Kamala Harris carried in 2024, by the way. Every single other state. And actually, she would be one of 3 Republican senators from a state that Joe Biden won in 2020. Because if you look at the composition of the Senate, you can see pretty quickly, if you just fill in all of the states that Joe Biden won in 2020, including Arizona, right? That's in there. New Mexico, Colorado, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, right? These are the 2 exceptions. Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, with Ron Johnson and now Dave McCormick. But then you fill in all of these guys, right? Let's keep filling in all the other states that... Oops, wrong color. Let's fill in all the other states. Georgia, you have Warnock and you have Ossoff. Virginia, those 2. Indiana, all up this coast here. New Hampshire, Democrats hold both of those. That's Angus King. He's technically an independent. Same thing with Bernie Sanders, but I'm going to put them down there. And then you have these guys all on this corridor here. They are all held there. That's Moreno's seat. That's not Burr anymore, I don't think. Who took his seat? Bud. Ted Bud. I mean, the only other one there, we might end up looking at, Ohio now all of a sudden being one of them, right? North Carolina potentially being one of them. But Maine, that would be one of 3 to actually be there. And then if you also look at Alaska, that'd be Peltola. They need Maine. They need this seat in Maine in order to hold the Senate. And this would be the map in a successful flip of the Senate in November. And so you'd have 2 Republican senators in states that Kamala Harris won, or Joe Biden won in 2020, and 3 Democratic senators in states that Donald Trump won in 2020. If you shift it to 2024, now all of a sudden you end up with a lot more, which is why it's not quite as interesting. And then these guys actually end up being in the quote-unquote right state, which I'm going to shift these around. Yeah, and then all of a sudden you end up with 11. But the interesting thing right now, though, is that you currently have an environment in which you actually have Democrats favoring netted very strong here, right? 8 senators for Democrats in states that Donald Trump won in 2024. Every single state that Trump won in 2020, all of them have all Republican senators. And every single state that Harris won in 2024, except for Maine seat that's up this year, has all Democratic senators. The states that flipped between 2 years are the ones that are in question here. So just to put in point there how polarized everything is it's very obvious to be able to tell which party the state votes for just based off its senatorship. But anyway, if they don't end up flipping Maine, which they may have signs that they won't, depending on how close things end up maintaining themselves here, right? Once results decide to start coming in, then, they'll have to look for different opportunities, right? You're looking at these flips here. They're already looking at 3, right? Then you're going to need to go and reach for Iowa, right? Josh Turek. Potentially, that's probably actually the easier of the two out of Texas. Or then, of course, you have Tallarico in Texas, but honestly, that's harder. For the main reason specifically, that if you ask me in 4 years from now, then I'd say Texas is easier than Iowa, because Iowa is right trending and Texas is left trending. Yes, it is still left trending despite its result in 2024. But as of right now, they haven't quite hit that mirror point where it gets to the point where Texas is easier than Iowa for Democrats, because Iowa has most recently elected a Democrat to the Senate in 2008. When's the last time that Texas did? 1988. So it's been 20 years longer, right? And it's been 18 years since the last time that Democrat won, right? Tom Harkin, right, in 2008. But Lloyd Benson was 20 years before that. So we are still not even anywhere close to the point at which, and there's Harkin flipping a seat in 84, and Chuck Grassley still kicking. Yeah, this was the last year of the Southern Democrats actually flipping seats at this point. Dale Bumpers. You got Pryor. Wow, both Senate seats in Arkansas were Democratic in 1990. Pryor and Dale Bumpers, man, that's crazy. I mean, they were winning unopposed. And then Hutchinson in 1996, Dale Bumpers, I don't know what happened to him, honestly. Jeff Sessions, Landrieu narrowly holding on there, and she actually didn't lose re-election all the way until 2014 to Bill Cassidy. But anyway, yeah, 2014 was the absolute death of the Southern Democrats that had managed to narrowly hold on in 2008, like Mary Landrieu, Jeff Pryor? Mark Pryor. Where'd I get Jeff from? I mean, they didn't even run a Republican against him. Kay Hagan managed to flip the seat. That's the last time that a Democrat also won a Senate election in North Carolina, was 2008. And back then you actually had both Senate seats in Montana held by Democrats. You had John Tester flip the seat and Mark Baucus hold on, and Johnson actually won in 2008 as well. But getting back to the main focal point here again is that, yeah, it's ancestrally, again, the last time that it went blue on the presidential level was 2012, right? You're looking at all of these, just because there's so many of them, I'm actually going to turn that off. Even these exurbs in the central part of the state, and also looking at some of these areas, like the Driftless area, were blue back in 2012, right? So they could come back. They have voted for only one, Rob Sand, but they have voted for a Democrat statewide in this decade. The last time that a Democrat won statewide in Texas, I believe, was 2006. So, again, it is all about that it is more ancestrally Democratic in Iowa, and so it is going to be easier in Iowa to be able to get somebody on the board than in Texas. But, and especially with someone like Josh Turek, yes, Hinson's a strong candidate, and yes, Texas, you have an atrocious candidate with Ken Paxton, somewhere between Mark Robinson and Roy Moore, and then you have between them and Graham Plattner. Honestly, Graham Plattner's worse than Paxton. But yeah, they might end up tanking themselves there. So that really kind of harms their hand when it comes to the Senate if Plattner doesn't end up securing a victory there. Graham Plattner now down, French Borough, Plattner 5, Costello 1, Mills 0. And I mean, that's like with basically nothing in, though. Again, I'm not sure if that's even like good. They fixed the page. Matthew Dunlap is winning randomly in French Borough, over here. At least the clips of French Borough that are in the district. This is the second district. This is held by, Democrat Jared Golden. On this, he won by, like half a point on the same ballot that Trump won the district by 9. Trump has won the district all 3 times that he ran for president. Then we have Maine governor for the Republicans, Robert Charles, winning by a very strong amount. That's probably going to be all the votes out of French Borough, according to the estimates here. Looks like that is actually all of them, but that's not necessarily enough to really make any conclusions, because there are literally 9 votes in right now. If we look at the U.S. Senate though. You can see 6 actually out of there, which is interesting. There it is. Shenna Bellows is actually leading right now. Nirav Shah is tied for second place with everybody else. Again, this is a really small sample size there as far as that goes. And so there's not necessarily anything to be able to make out of that. I have no idea why they actually divide these areas. They might be the county lines. No, this is Penobscot right there. I have no idea why they divide these up, considering literally nobody lives here. So, again, nothing necessarily to say for that right there. Looking at South Carolina, Lindsey Graham down below 60%, doing pretty poorly up in Greenville County, only leading by 3 right there. I'd assume that's probably where Mark Lynch is from, this area up here. Considering he's doing very well in the rest of the state there. And we look at South Carolina Governor, Pamela Yvette only ahead by 2 points at 26%, which means that there probably will be a runoff in the election in South Carolina. Myrtle Beach still waiting on the second half of the vote there. That's going to be a relatively large vote sink for Yvette. Looking up in Greenville, same sort of thing there. Balanced out probably relatively cleanly. I mean, she's narrowly winning, so that's probably not going to be much for her there, but she's winning by 31 in Horry County, so that's probably going to be pretty big for her there. But then you're also looking at Lexington and Richmond counties are probably going to be pretty strong for Wilson. And Ralph Norman is narrowly leading. He's doing well enough, I guess, basically everywhere to narrowly be able to pull a lead with the lead in York that he has. 43% reporting. I don't know where on earth those numbers came from. That feels wrong. Yep, they just fixed it. Okay, there we go. York County now is up, and so now we have Yvette. But it does show that actually how not far behind Ralph Northman is. Oh, no, he's down by 34,000 votes. That was completely a blip there, but York County is now completely in, and so Yvette is leading by 5 points. We're filling in a little bit more again in the black belt. You can see there Wilson's doing pretty well in those areas. Again, as I said, if this is an open stream, so if anyone has any questions, feel free to just ask in the chat. They will be answered live. Myrtle Beach area again. Still waiting on that. That's, again, a really big area. Affluent white voters there. Maine, you have Graham Plattner ahead by 4 votes against David Costello. It's really nothing. Again, still waiting on Maine. Nothing happening there. All right, so here's just something fun that I was going to do. It's a self-rating of how well I know a state's politics across the United States. So, to a degree, I obviously, if you don't know, I am American, and you'll be able to probably glean in a few minutes of what state I'm from if you don't know already. I'm not necessarily super secretive about it or anything, but start off in Alabama. This is generally more about, like, the fact that I know a bit about how it, you know, the black belt there, how they typically end up voting. Some areas I do know the general, like, county map and stuff like that, so I feel like that's a little bit more than baseline knowledge, and to the point where it's, you know, definitely helpful in being able to understand things. Alabama's one of the more interesting states to me. Then we have Alaska. Honestly, I don't necessarily know too much about this. I know a good bit about, like, the Bigich family and stuff like that, but I feel like it's not necessarily to the point where it's more than, like, if you don't know the Bigich family in Alaska, then I don't necessarily know that, like, you can know the presidential history and the fact that it only has voted Democratic once in 1964, which is the second presidential election that it was allowed to vote in, but that doesn't necessarily give you enough information about it as a whole. I feel like it's more or less the baseline knowledge to understand things about, like, the Bigich family and its history and stuff. I did watch a video by Voting Trend, so I feel like, honestly, there, I'm going to give it up there, but, honestly, Arizona, I think this is pretty baseline. I don't necessarily know too much about it. Phoenix area, I know that's really where, like, 90% of the population is or whatever, right? I mean, you have 2 million votes out of Maricopa County alone. It's like over 60% of the state's total votes are out of Maricopa County. And so, when you get down to stuff like that, I don't know necessarily too much about it as a whole. I don't know about its politicians and stuff. Arkansas, pretty low. Like, and people I know from there are like Bill Clinton and stuff, and I know, like, again, like the black belt and stuff like that, but not necessarily enough to really give enough understanding or to be able to, like, explain much to people. California, probably more baseline. I know a good bit about, like, the area along, this area I know about Central Cali, sorts of areas. San Bernardino County, the largest county by land area in the entire United States. Not the largest county equivalent, though. That is Yukon, Koyukuk, Alaska, which is just a census area, though. Colorado, relatively baseline there. Nothing absurdly insane as far as that goes. Connecticut, this is where that's a small northeastern state, one of the ones that really tanked for Harris there, right? It voted for Biden by 20 and then dropped by 6.5. That's not necessarily surprising, though, or 5.5, because that's about how much the general popular vote shifted by. So not an absurdly shocking revelation. Delaware, I mean, more or less baseline, right? Joe Biden's home state. And the story about the special election for that Senate seat there, during the start of the Tea Party movement, things like that, a little bit more. So maybe like some things. Well, I know a bit about. I mean, I don't live too far from Delaware, so northern part of the state, you have Sussex County, which is a heavily left-trending county, right? Same sort of thing with Kent County. Meanwhile, Newcastle is the reason that the state isn't shifting too much, right? It actually, but you have the southern parts of it are actually shifting hard to the left. It also trended, actually voted for Clinton by only 11.5, and then voted for Harris by 15. Left-trending state, pretty small. Florida, relatively baseline. I feel like it's one of those states that usually a lot of people I feel like know a lot about. I mean, I feel like I know quite a few things well, but compared to how much other people know, I feel like I'm a little bit on the low end. For the more specifics about like the state's history and stuff. Going to Georgia, pretty baseline as far as that goes. Maybe a little bit poorly. Definitely poorly for Hawaii. It's a relatively like obscure state, I feel like, and so it's not necessarily a priority for me to understand to that degree. Where its politicians are relatively. I mean, I know like Mark Green and stuff like that, like governor, and what's her name? I can see her face. Starts with an H. Hirono, Mazie Hirono, one of the senators there. I know some of the names, just not Idaho, I know close to nothing, like Jim Risch and some names, but other than that, like, I know some fun facts, like randomly the Idaho 1st District was one of the huge, insane flips that happened in 2008. Randomly, it broke really hard when Ada County flew to the left out of nowhere. But, I mean, other than that, it's not necessarily too surprising. Looking again, now we can say that, yeah, Pamela Yvette and Alan Wilson go into a runoff. I'm not necessarily too surprised there. Because, I mean, none of them are going to probably break any large margin there. And so, that's probably off the list as far as that goes. A little bit disappointing for Yvette, probably hoping to end up breaking through there. Lindsey Graham easily going to win that by itself. But, I mean, under 60% is not too good there. And still nothing in on Maine. So, Illinois, I don't see nothing special with Illinois, to the point that, like, probably relatively baseline. Indiana, same sort of thing. I know like some things well. I know a bit about like its left trend blurb throughout the late aughts into the early tens, but then it flew right back. Right, its brief period of having a Democratic senator back in 2012, Joe Donnelly. You had, I don't think it's actually had a governor. It's by far the most Republican in the entire. I mean, it almost did. 2012, Mike Pence only won by 3. He might have lost re-election in 2016, which might have been why he was tapped for VP. Holcomb won by just under 6 points in 2016. And then, 2020 was very Republican for Holcomb, and then in 2024, Braun only went by 13.25. It's one of those states that isn't super secure about voting one party or the other. The last time it voted for a Democrat for governor was 2000. So, wow. A lot of these actually had a Democratic governor. Hoeven versus Heitkamp. Those are pretty big names in North Dakota. Um, or at least were at one point. So excuse me. Obviously, not nothing insane, but I do know. I feel like I know a little bit there. Iowa politics, I'm pretty good with as far as that goes. It's one of the more interesting states. One of those two you'll see a pattern with the other one later. Kansas, I mean, I feel like relatively baseline, same sort of thing with Kentucky. Not anything absurd. Louisiana, I mean, I don't really know specifically a whole lot about, like, I feel like there's a lot more in there that I'm not necessarily sure about, specifically with why they made their jungle primary, some more specific things along that line, why specifically some areas are, where they are, demographic trends. This also includes, like where specific groups of people live, right? I feel like I know Iowa a good bit better demographically than a state like Louisiana. Maine, relatively well. Maryland, some things well. I seem to know that a little bit there. Massachusetts, not super well. Michigan, again, it's one of the swing states, so I feel like none of the swing states are going to be just baseline. I do know a good bit about some of those states there. Some things well, like specifically focusing on, what kinds of groups of people live where and demographic information that can be useful. Minnesota, same sort of thing there, but not quite as strong. Looking at Mississippi, not anything insane there. Missouri, probably the same thing. I mean, quite a few are probably going to be about baseline. Montana, Nebraska is a little bit more interesting, mostly because of the Senate elections that have come up, and it's a very left-trending state. It's a little bit interesting to see how heavy these counties are. And how much of the population lives literally right there. It's one of the most population extreme states in the entire country, the most being Nevada, where you have probably a little bit more knowledge than New Hampshire. I mean, I don't really know specifically about like demographic information and stuff, so I'm gonna leave it in baseline. New Jersey, I live near New Jersey. I'm not really surprised about that. New Mexico, probably relatively baseline, maybe a little bit less. New York, I feel like I'm lacking a little bit. I know some things well, like specifically demographic information, like I went over earlier. Wealthier New Yorkers live up there. This is more specifically the area there. This is rich white voters on Richmond. So I got a little bit more there. North Carolina, say I've been interested in for a while. Another one of those swing states. North Dakota, I feel like I know like a little bit more than the average person, but not necessarily to a point where it's going to be interesting or anything. I think there's not really much to know about North Dakota, though, honestly. No offense to them. Ohio politics, I know very well. This is one of the most interesting states to me. One of the ones that I don't live in. It's the most interesting to me. Ohio, I've been there literally once. Because, it's all the way across the state from me. But, and so focusing on Ohio and definitely specifically with those two interesting races later this year. It's one of the ones that, it's a pretty big state. I know, like, down to, like, the county level, some specifics. So that's one of the more interesting ones to me there. Oklahoma, relatively baseline knowledge. Oregon, I feel like sort of the same thing. Pennsylvania, inside and out. This is my home state. And so generally speaking, I know like a lot of stuff here about county level. I could fill in this county map from memory. And specifics about the state's past and history and things like that. Not to a specifically insane degree, but enough. Rhode Island, probably relatively strong. South Carolina, I mean, I feel like I know some things well. Again, as I said, like demographics and such. South Dakota, maybe not so much. Tennessee, I mean, I went a little bit into it with Tennessee's 7th congressional district election, but nothing insane. Texas, definitely pretty well there. Maybe not like very well, but I don't want to put it in some things well, because it is a level above some of these states. But I know like a lot about demographic information in this state. This one is also something very interesting to me. Second largest state in the entire country. Definitely shifting demographically. Same sort of thing for California. I might be getting a little bit more into Cali over time. But then you go to Utah. I mean, nothing insane there. Then you go to Vermont. I mean, it's Vermont is a relatively liberal state, which is kind of a little bit interesting. I know a good bit about it, like specifically how it shifted from the most conservative to the most liberal state in the entire country, or the most Republican to the most Democratic. The party switched and it followed. Then you go to Virginia. This one, I think, honestly, is another one of those that's going to be somewhat interesting to me there. Washington, relatively. West Virginia, somewhere on the border here. Another one of those states that is around Pennsylvania. But then you have, I don't really know too much about it there. Wisconsin, I know very well. It's another one of the states that interests me. Specifically with these very left trending suburbs, which is a huge shift to how they were. Basically, the entire state has flipped how it votes, which very few states have something like that. It just intrigues me. Then Wyoming, I mean, I don't really know that much about it, honestly. There's not much to know. Again, it's kind of like North Dakota. I'm not really sure there's much to know about it. But specifically, that is basically what we're looking at here. So I probably reference stuff like this a while. I don't pretend to know everything. I try to pretend to not know everything, but there are some states that you should take my opinions and thoughts with a little bit of grain of salt, and some of them that generally I know what I'm talking about, where, you know, we're looking at, like, oh yeah, Josh Shapiro, yes, he's very popular, but he's not going to win by 20, right? The margins required in not just Philadelphia, which is very right trending area, specifically in these southern chunks, but also Berks, Lancaster, York, Bucks, Schuylkill, even, right? Carbon, which randomly voted for Obama in 2008, right? Cumberland would be insane. Lebanon, right? We'd have to look at like Westmoreland and Washington. Heavy Republican vote sinks in that area. Butler, right? He'd have to win Beaver again by an absurd amount. Luzerne County. I don't see that being enough push come to shove, and there's enough people that still don't know who Stacey Garrity is, even though she's the state treasurer, that I think they're going to walk in and press the button for Republican, even though they don't really know who she is, because that's just how it works. We do have, 3 towns reporting now. We have Burnham County, or Burnham area, Troy Jackson in the lead there. Troy Jackson leading in Hammond, and where's the other one? There. Westmoreland. So, all right, again, hello, everybody. If you are new here or just started watching since the last time, this is an open stream, so feel free to ask questions in the comments. They will be answered live. They'll be answered live, as there's not too much to be focused on right now. That will not be true on the midterms. I will be very busy, but yeah, definitely looking at a... looking at a pretty interesting contest up here, and looking at the Maine 2nd House District here, pretty close there. Wonder what the reasoning for this is. Joe Baldacci being all the way up there. He's currently 3rd, but I mean, there's literally only 87 votes in. North Dakota closes in 23 minutes, and so we are still waiting on that. And then we have Nevada at 10 p.m. So, Nevada's a very slow counting state, so I really don't expect much from it. It's probably 2nd slowest counting. It was the last state to be called in 2024. 2nd last. Arizona was actually last, which is insane because it was the largest margin. But anyway, I think it was just because Arizona's just a larger state. But, yeah, looking again at how the, man, Lindsey Graham below 60%. That's not phenomenal. I mean, he's over 50, so it's not atrocious by any means, but like, if South Carolina goes, then I see no reason why that wouldn't flip, and then you have at that point you'd have Florida, you'd have Texas, you'd have Nebraska, and that's actually an independent. Because of how Kentucky votes for Senate, you probably have Kentucky. Montana, not quite. Maybe Kansas, because it's trending left. So you'd have 58-42 at that point if you were to lose South Carolina. So if Lindsey Graham does somehow manage to mess this up, which he would absolutely have to mess up in order for this to go for a Democrat, right? It is still Trump plus, 18? South Carolina? So it was consistently 16 points to the right of the country, as we pointed out here, right? Raw PVI set 16.76. So obviously 13 points for the national environment. And again, the national environment, just for context, in 2020 for the Senate was R plus 2.3. Mostly pulled by Texas and all of these deep southern red states without the counterbalance of California or New York. The only states you had to balance that out was technically like Oregon and Virginia and New Jersey and Massachusetts, which really isn't that big. So you had Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico. Like Illinois is like the biggest raw vote dump there. So that's probably the main issue for Democrats being able to win the majority there. So I wonder like what the partisan breakup of people who use this website is, because you see a lot of clown emojis reactions on basically every single page, and so it's kind of interesting to see that. And also you can see on this one, there's a lot of rainbow flags. So obviously they are trashing on Lindsey Graham. I'd assume that's probably mostly Democratic, but I mean, Republicans don't seem to like Lindsey Graham too much either, but he keeps on winning. Right, he won by 10 against, I forget which Johnson. Was it Jermaine Johnson? Jamie Harrison. Not a Johnson at all. But yeah, basically, Jamie Harrison was a phenomenal fundraiser and such, and he still ended up losing by 10. So even with this primary turnout, and even with all of that, I really wouldn't get your hopes up if you were a Democrat here for South Carolina. Even with someone who's generally, yes, as strong as Annie Andrews, who has been officially named the nominee as of 20 minutes ago by DDHQ. Joe Baldacci has taken a lead in Viesi, which is an area right around the Bangor area. What? Oh, it's actually right there. Okay. And so he is now taking the lead, but there's literally less than 1% reporting right now. In the state of Maine, 380 votes out of many, many more expected, and and yeah, the lion's share is out of the area of Liberty, a good bit out of Cornville, outer Bangor area, one over here in Cutler. Other than that, yeah, I mean, Aurora, but yeah, it's relatively evenly distributed. This is the largest congressional district by area east of the Mississippi River, I believe. It's very close, but I'm pretty sure it is true. A little bit larger than PA 15, which appears to be second place. Alright, so here, again, we can see that Robert Charles is doing pretty well again across the these areas here. Leading in Westmanland, it's still got a lot of towns to report, and so they don't tabulate rank choice unless that is necessary. So hopefully he'll end up breaking 50%. Otherwise, they will have to tabulate rank choice voting, which would be very annoying for everybody. But if he's down by like a 1.5 from 50%, then he will easily be declared the winner. Like even before rank choice actually kicks off, because there just won't be enough to defeat him. And so, as we can see there, he is, I believe, winning every single area that's reporting so far, other than Hammond, where he is tied. Oh, I thought those colors were dependent on what showed up, but apparently no, that's just the tie color. That's weird. Democrats literally have, like, nothing in so far. Shaw's narrowly winning VAZ with almost everything in. Jackson's winning Burnham. Bellows is winning Frenchboro with literally, like, nothing in. Jackson winning Baileyville. Tied, actually. Hammond. Jackson's ahead. So now we are looking again at mostly just waiting a little bit longer. We have not way too much longer before the polls close. We're looking at 11 minutes left before the polls do close in the state of North Dakota, statewide. So specifically here, we're looking again, Maine U.S. Senate. It appears that Graham Plattner is easily going to win the nomination, even though there's basically like nothing officially down that low. Okay, 27 minutes ago, Tom Steyer conceded his race. AP projected that Hilton won the second spot about an hour and a half ago. So specifically here, we're looking at the... That's funny. Okay, so quickly scoping out, nothing's really interesting happening. North Dakota probably again is going to do the thing that what say was it that was split last week with their closing times. But basically the eastern part of the state, the polls have been closed for 51 minutes now, but they're not going to actually drop anything until the polls close statewide at 9, just to not confuse anybody. Makes me a little bit annoyed, but, you know, whatever, it's okay. And so, yeah, we're looking again at the... numbers as far as this goes is going to be pretty brutal for Democrats, no matter who ends up winning here. I'd be surprised if Fedorchak ends up actually losing. But, you know, we've had primary upsets before. Zach Lawn winning, even just last week, was relatively surprising. Oh, yeah, literally South Dakota did the exact same thing. South Dakota, literally the neighbor to the south, did the exact same thing, where they have a few counties that don't close. But also, South Dakota took a long time to report. Like, actually surprisingly long time to report there, which was a little bit weird. Unexpected. Weren't able to actually just really say much of anything for for a good while, as far as that goes. So really nothing coming in Maine at all, and we still don't have like anything out of South Carolina. So things are going really slow tonight, as far as things go currently. Got enough drinks to last me a good while, because I'm gonna keep talking here. Um, so you guys want to see? There's nothing going on right now. Let me know in the chat right now. I'll answer any questions. I will get whatever house update for this month, June, coming out tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. 9 a.m. as always. Make sure to check that out. Don't miss it. Got all the newest updates there for the month of June currently as things go. I mean, I don't even really know if how much more is going to keep changing. Not much has changed in quite a while for those projections, so kind of proves that they're working though, right? They project what will happen on election night, and so if that projection hasn't changed much, then that's pretty good actually. Forecasting, not nowcasting, right? So, Graham Plattner is going to be the nominee. I don't know why they're calling it, probably because there's only 1% in, but honestly, it's strong enough that I really don't see much of a reason to not call it just like immediately. Just from the perspective of it being as far as anything along those lines go, though. I don't really think much is happening. I mean, the Maine is still taking their time. I don't know if they're like pre-counting RCV. So, I mean, that might be what's going on here, why they're taking so long. Because the ones that are coming in first, with the exception of VZ, are all really small. So they might be pre-counting RCV to try to make things smoother later on. But it's gonna tank a little bit of time now to save time later, so they don't have to like open back up ballots and stuff. At least that's at least what I'm like potentially guessing might be going on. So currently, again, just waiting on basically anything to really come in Maine. There's a lot of towns that have some results to wait up on. So okay. We're just still trickling in at this point, and we're down to what 3.5 minutes until the polls close in the state of North Dakota, where we will probably get a dump relatively quickly out of the eastern part of the state, but then probably the western part's going to start trickling in, and it's going to take a good while. So here we're looking again at specifically what the calling is waiting for at this point is probably just more to come in. I mean, Janet Mills probably doesn't have like some magical reserve somewhere. It's kind of weird watching DDHQ actually like care. Why do they have this? Who the heck is Dan Smariglio? Whatever, dude. Yeah, literally not a single voters are even reported yet because they probably don't even care to report them because it's so blatantly obvious. But to the point where Janet Mills doesn't have any magical vote surpluses somewhere, and she doesn't energize the base the same way that Plattner does, despite all of his obviously all of his issues. So when you're looking at, I mean, David Costello seems relatively inoffensive. I'm kind of surprised that he's not doing much better, because he'd easily win the Senate election. From the national environment and Collins' disapproval. This is like narrowly hinging on a lean race right now in the Senate. It's pretty close, right? Like a 3-point margin or so. That is more than close enough to still potentially have a flip in if there's a good enough night for Susan Collins. Forget like down ballot or anything like that. If it's a strong enough election, just down ballot, then it'll end up being, you know, the greatest, setup for the Democrats there would probably be anybody else, because Janet Mills isn't necessarily energetic. Nobody knows who Costello is. If Costello had managed to get himself out there, I don't even remember exactly where he's from or what he does, but we're now down to 30 seconds before the polls close in the highlighted yellow states, including the state of North Dakota, where we are waiting on the primary there. Nothing exciting necessarily, but incumbent Julie Fedorchak versus challenger Alex Balaz. And so we are now down to just 5 seconds, 9 p.m. on the East Coast. The polls have just closed across the state of North Dakota, and so now we have the official hold off there, and so that is going to be waiting on the results for the first ballots to start coming in. We're probably going to have a few dumps across the eastern part of the state as these counties have been counting for about an hour. So we may have some results coming in very soon, but that is just about it as far as that goes for right now, at least. We don't have any expectation that, I mean, potentially something surprising could happen tonight, but as of right now, there's no real, there's an exact tie, 374 to 374. And look at that. Wow, everyone thought Nirav Shah was going to win, and all of a sudden now it's 50%. Isn't that insane? So, again, looking specifically at the numbers here, Nirav Shah, only 1% in, which it is taking its sweet time. It's honestly getting a bit irritating. But, Robert Charles doing very strong. I think he is honestly basically the nominee at this point. Even if he doesn't break 50%, he's close enough that even like James Libby, that's not going to be enough for him, but probably going to mostly preference to him there. And then David Jones, and then Owen McCarthy, and then Robert Wessels will probably end up breaking him over 50%. He doesn't even need any of, like, maybe Masons, but he doesn't need Bushes or Midgeleys. He's far enough ahead that he's easily going to end up now. And there we go. Look at that. Already got some votes in coming in here, even from the western part of the state. But yeah, these eastern ones, over 50% in. And yeah, Fedorchak is easily going to win the nomination here. There's no real contest as far as that goes. Fedorchak is going to be the nominee in North Dakota. So already going to basically just check that out. And yeah, North Dakota statewide, I mean, you have public service, public superintendent of public instruction, nonpartisan officially, but they're probably all like Republicans. Then you have public service commissioner, Republicans. Why is there no non-colored one? That's weird. Oh, there's two. There's two seats. Public Service Commissioner and other Public Service Commissioner. They retracted the results and then, like, undid it? I don't even know. But apparently, yeah, John Peterson is apparently done there. So anyway. But yeah, that's easily going to be a win for Fedorchak, being able to win that race statewide there. That's no real surprise. She was easily expected to win basically from the start at this point, and it would have been a lot more surprising had she not managed to secure the nomination as far as that goes. And so I think I'm probably good with South Carolina there, but I mean, it's, I'm kind of curious to see how far down he may go, because now he's down to 59%. Depends on how things go in the counties that are remaining that are deciding that they don't need to count votes tonight. Maine governor, I mean, really still looking at nothing there, and Rob Shaw still narrowly leading, but still nothing necessarily to point to as far as that is concerned. That's not what I meant to do. There we go. Okay. And fix that. There we go. Now we're ready for 10. Have a tie right there. Jackson is definitely going to end up leading in second place. Nobody is going to break 50%. I can tell that right now. That nobody's going to break 50% for the Democratic nomination. And so that's probably a bit disappointing. I don't necessarily think that there was anything that had much to show that they were going to do very, like, explicitly go one way or the other, right? If you look at some of the polling here, which there's barely any of, right? Hannah Pingree actually leading the final, but round one, something like this, and Rob Shaw 25, Troy Jackson 20, that is absolutely possible. And then it appears that Shanna Bellows' support goes mostly to Pingree and a little bit to Jackson. Angus King III then gets cut out. He actually loses support, which is weird. How does that happen? That makes no sense at all. Oh, some votes get exhausted, but, like, how does that? Oh, well. Troy Jackson then gets a good chunk. Hannah Pingree narrowly above Jackson, though. Hannah Pingree v. Shaw. There's a chance that it could end up being Jackson v. Shaw. There's a chance it could be between Pingree and Jackson. There's still a lot of things open. And considering that's 5.4%, it could basically end up being anybody. And this was also done a week ago, so things could have slightly changed a little bit. It could end up being Bellows v. King. We don't know. But it appears that right now, Angus King III is, in fact, not going to be the nominee, which is a little bit interesting considering that his dad is currently senator. So maybe he just doesn't energize the Democratic base enough, and he probably didn't do too well as far as campaigning. But there is still the potential that something interesting could happen. There is still only like 2% of the vote in. But as of right now, it doesn't necessarily seem to be a too strong of a sign for him there. And so if you're here just joining us, welcome. We are now at just after 9 p.m. Eastern, and the polls have closed in the state of North Dakota. It is easily going to be a victory for the incumbent here. Julie Fedorchak just projected the winner on DDHQ. She's easily going to win the nomination, so nothing's necessarily surprising there. We are still waiting on a lot more results out of Maine, where we're sitting at about like 2% in. So that's coming in pretty slowly. South Carolina, we are mostly done with, though. We are looking at specifically the first House district. We can look at this a little bit. Nancy LaCour and Mac DeFord are the two that are going to be moving to a runoff. And so this is Nancy Mace's old seat. She retired from the seat to run for governor. She is currently in 5th place in the primary. 72% reporting. We are probably not going to have much else happening. They are looking at this one there. The Republicans are going to be favored in this, but wow, there's actually a lot here. Nobody really knows who to vote for. I don't think Trump made an endorsement in this seat. The second district here, this is the one, on the other side of Clyburn's district, which is the 6th. Republicans are very strongly favored here. It's going to be Robinson v. Khalifa, according to apparently the markets very heavily favor Robinson. Again, don't put too much into markets. Then you have the 3rd district, which is a very Republican district. So there's not really much reason to even look at that. And the 6th district here, this is against Jim Clyburn. Democrats are very strongly favored here. And this is going to be a John Peterson fighting against him. And so I did already record the House election video that's going to come out tomorrow. So none of these guys will be in the video. So because I couldn't see the future, believe it or not, unfortunately enough. Lindsey Graham sitting below 60%, which is not a phenomenal sign. He's not like below 50%, which would be atrocious, but 27.7% for Mark Lynch here, looking at a primary challenge to him. He is still relatively unpopular, but it is a Republican enough state that it will not necessarily matter. Wow, results finally had come in from Chester County and then just vanished. South Carolina Governor Pamela Yvette v. Alan Wilson. Yvette is still very heavily favored in the betting markets, but oh well, again, take that with like, grab a fistful of salt and eat it, and then take the betting markets with that. And then Jermaine Johnson will be the nominee for the Democrats. And randomly, Orangeburg County is going for Webster. It's probably his home county. I don't know why. Oh well, that's just home field advantage sometimes. Maine still does not want to report any ballots. Here's a tier maker thingy that I literally made like an hour ago at this point. This is just how well I know each state's how well I know each state's like politics and electoral dynamics and such. And so yeah, guess which state I'm from. I don't care, I'm copying that. I don't want to actually have to download it. And so we're specifically looking at is oof. Oh wow, it blew up. Oh, it says Isaiah Martin there and everything. Oh my word, he made it. Reposted it, shocker. Yeah, 58% in the primary is not a phenomenal vote share, looking at the primary results for Lindsey Graham. So I'd be a little bit concerned if my name was Lindsey Graham on how things will go in November. He's probably still going to win by a relatively respectable margin, but considering the point, yeah, Maine's got some funny stuff going on here with their turnout for Democrats here. Looks like this one, they literally have 2 votes in one of these, and it's already already 95% in, and there's literally 2 votes in here. Where is that? I mean, it's northern Maine. There's first off, nobody lives up here, and second off, if they do, they're not Democrats. Like that's just what happens. Well, at least not anymore. They voted for Obama twice, probably. I can't find it. Was it? I don't know. Might have retracted it. I'm not 100% sure, but it does not appear to be there. Robert Charles is easily going to win the nomination here, even if he, again, as I said, even if he doesn't end up making 50% right now, like tonight. Even maybe like 2 rounds of RCV, because James Libby doesn't even have enough to make him over 50, and then add David Jones, that's not even enough. So like maybe 3 to 4 rounds of RCV, he will easily be able to win that, but still just generically off of that is not going to be necessarily enough to, it's not going to be called tonight or whatever. So Um, Maine Senate's still really not coming in. Like they're not really counting much of anything right now. They're going pretty slow, and I'm not quite sure. It's a little bit irritating on slow nights like this because not only is there not much going on, but people aren't necessarily as interested in what's going on. So, um, just for fun, let's look at what everybody else is doing. Right now I know that oh, Anthony's streaming. Yeah, he is. Look at that. DDHQ is not surprised. FEA is streaming. Political excess. Red Equal Politics. I saw that in voting trend. So, what's he up to? Okay, so apparently there was a big vote drop actually out of the Portland area, and so that's going to be a pretty big gain there. Specifically, it had a big drop for Plattner, up to 11% in now. Now they finally called him the nominee. But yeah, if you look at this Portland area, central Portland, netting him just under 6,000 votes. And so that's easily going to be enough to basically secure him the nomination, considering the fact that there's not going to necessarily be enough happen. Oh my word, that's so dumb. Um, Not enough to really be able to have Mills doesn't have any hidden little, you know, magic anything anywhere. So it's, you know, not going to be any. I need to get back to writing on Substack. Um, all right. Well, more or less what we're looking at here is just continuous slowly trickling in votes. Again, as you can see, Graham Plattner has officially secured the nomination according to the DDHQ website and such. I mean, it was basically obvious from the get-go, unless you had an insanely ridiculous result coming in, like from the first town that reported. But it appears that Joe Baldacci is leading, not super surprising here. He's a pretty strong candidate, from what I can tell. He's only had by 4, though, probably going to end up being an RCV tabulation, which is going to take days. Then you have the same sort of thing probably happening for the governorship for Republicans. Maybe not. Robert Charles appears to be dropping down a little bit now. He was at like 47% not that long ago. Portland appears to be favoring Jonathan Bush. So that would be where that is there. Charles is a very close second, though. 38% of the estimated vote is in, and almost certainly we will have ranked choice tabulation for the Democrats here. But interestingly, Portland now actually is in for Troy Jackson by a relatively large margin. Nirav Shah is actually 4th place now. Angus King III is almost certainly not going to end up being the next governor of Maine. This is more or less because of how partisan it is, and also specifically because of how I'm actually slow down how much I'm talking because there's not a lot going on here. Specifically because of how blue the state of Maine is, and also looking at the fact of how blue the year is going to be. It's almost certainly true that whoever ends up winning the primary for the Democrats will be the next governor of Maine. But, 10% in, Troy Jackson ahead by 4 points against Hannah Pingree. Shanna Bellows down by 2 from her, and then Nirav Shah down by 4 from her. Graham Plattner, 76.5% of the vote. 907, what are you talking about? I literally was on here at 907. 88% estimated in. There's nowhere really for Janet Mills to be able to win here. She suspended her campaign weeks ago. David Costello is the only real opposition, and honestly, I wonder if none of Graham Plattner's issues had shown up, if like how much of the vote he'd have gotten. He's still getting over 2/3 of the vote, despite his issues, obviously, as a candidate. Again, currently we are still staring down at very slow reporting. Wow, Annie Andrews is barely winning by less than an incumbent senator. That's not good for Lindsey Graham. He has dropped below 60%. He'd better hope that's not going to stay true, and you got a more favorable vote dump coming in out of Greenville County. Also, a larger vote dump out of Charleston as well to help balance that out. South Carolina governor, is he going to be Pamela Vett via Alan Wilson? They will go to a runoff. South Carolina governor for the Democrats, Jermaine Johnson will win with no runoff. North Dakota, House at large, Julie Fedorchak going to win. She is the projected winner. This is not a surprise. She is the incumbent. She is the current House representative for the statewide House district in North Dakota. So, Slow nights always start to drag. So again, all right, let's just look ahead at what's going to be happening later in the year. So specifically, could probably purge these real quick. In this moment in time, we're still awaiting a lot more results from quite a few more states, mostly just Maine, specifically waiting for some to be able to glean some more out of that. Troy Jackson is currently leading the Democratic field, 11% in. Still have a lot of random towns out here that have a lot left to report. We're down to about half an hour before the polls close, across quite a bit more. Trump is again glee posting about his endorsements winning. Like, yeah, Julie Fedorchak won. Not surprising. Pamela advances. Yeah, no one's really surprised. Right? Like, Paul LePage is officially the nominee for Maine 2nd Congressional District. So, I'm looking now at the Democratic side of that. Joe Baldacci is leading very narrowly against Jordan Wood. Either of them would end up probably being relatively strong general election candidates, just purely based off the national environment. I think that they Democrats are very narrowly favored. Nancy Mace conceded the race 40 minutes ago and endorsed Alan Wilson. Still just awaiting more vote count. Sorry for being quiet there. There's not really unfortunately there's not really much happening as of right now, and so it's just mostly trailing Still, Maine is very... All right, well, what we're looking at again is specifically focused on some of these. The biggest cities here are going to be outer Augusta, and then you have Bangor, a little bit in Waterville. Really just looking at randomly, you have Liberty, you have Cornville, you have some of these areas out over here, Cutler, a little bit up in the northern chunk, but not too much. And the rest of it's just mostly just rural blob. Statewide contest. Troy Jackson's lead has started to fall. Oh, well, look at that. All of a sudden now Troy Jackson's favored, even though Narav Shah's been favored for forever. Isn't that weird? Yeah, again, betting markets don't know everything. You have a lot out of Pownall. Wow. Okay. Augusta area, you have a good bit. Then you have a little bit more in the southern part of the state. Portland is basically done. You have some of the outer regions down there. York. Again, Pownall's probably the biggest dump that's left. Wesley, Bar Harbor. You know, there's just a lot of towns with just a few votes in there. And so, still got a lot left to go because they are each individually putting in their numbers, and it's going to take a while. And so that is, in fact, going to be a big point of not contention necessarily, more like just so. I mean, you got Outer Portland now starting to turn in a little bit. You got Long Island in there. You got Falmouth, but still, the majority of votes, right, about 84% of the expected, is still just sitting around, not yet tallied up, which is, you know, fine. It's fine. It's irritating, but more or less, nothing's really happening. Unfortunately, we are waiting another half hour left before the polls close in Nevada. And then there's, I mean, you have the Nevada U.S. House races, but other than that, it's really not that much to it. Maine is going to take days to count. So, Currently still just awaiting more results. And so honestly, Maine governor, again, specifically Republicans, they're probably they're not necessarily gonna have a shot, right? It's a red enough year that, or blue enough year that those colors are still wrong for some reason. I don't know why. They're literally right like everywhere. Nope, it's also wrong there. It's weird. I don't get it. But basically, we're everywhere. It is in fact a then we have what, I don't even, up here randomly, like they're just not counting votes, and it's a little bit irritating because there's not necessarily anything else to be looking at specifically. But I'm just gonna start riffing here. So the results in Maine, now I don't know about town level, right? You can kind of make out like Aroostook right there, Penobscot there. I don't remember the name of the other ones though. I don't freaking know Maine counties. Oh, it always goes down there. There's Penobscot. That's Piscataquis. See, I don't even know. Piscataquis, Penobscot right there. You have, which apparently goes through this area for some reason. I don't understand. No, it's a little, okay, that makes no sense. Washington there. This is a left trending county, I'm pretty sure. No, it's actually right trending a little bit. I don't even know. Again, if you compare these two, it's a pretty good metric. Statewide, move to the left by 4. All of these are Republican trending. This is Republican trending. This is Republican trending, Republican trending. And then the narrowly Republican trending, and then you have basically stagnant, and then left. So basically, it's getting more extreme. The first are just going to vote more for Democrats, second, more for Republicans. But if we're looking at a Senate election where currently, I mean, again, yeah, that's not really what we're talking about. The governorship, I find it difficult to see a world in which we have, you know, where we have a Republican governor of Maine, especially this year. I'm pretty sure the last time that happened was 2014. But again, we obviously have, like, along the southern trench here is obviously going to be safe blue along the 1st district. These are all going to end up being safe easily in a bluer environment, especially Hancock, which was actually a lot closer for Clinton's, another one of those left trending counties. Waldo moving a little bit to the left, but I mean actually right trending as we just saw there. But probably going to end up being like a relatively high as far as that goes. It's going to be different from the Senate. States definitely do still split ticket vote in some scenarios, and this is definitely going to be probably one of them. This is definitely going to be one of them, right? These two are still going to end up being safe. That doesn't necessarily matter on any level that is, that is consequentially also of Aroostook, which is just barely less than both of them, just due to, I believe, like the little cities up there. Excuse me, that you can see up here, right? You got like Fort Kent, which is where US 1 ends, the north end, Presque Isle, right? You have some mini cities in this area that's a little bit, have some population to them. Then you have Washington County as well, probably going in there. Piscataquis is probably going to, Penobscot is one of those, like, I mean, it voted for Trump at 10.9, Trump at 10.9 again. A little bit right trending, right? Because the state, compared to the country as a whole, actually compared to the country, it's left trending. Compared to the state, it is right trending. So depends on what you want to base that off of. It could potentially make things a little bit confusing based on how things go as far as that. But then you look at, Kennebec, which is where the capital is, a little bit right trending of a county, right? 3.6 2.8, and Harris won it by more than Clinton did, but it's probably going to be one of those that's going to be, probably voting for the Democrats there. Androscoggin, another right-trending county, but probably going to end up voting for the Democrats there. Oxford just dropping down 0.9%. And then Franklin, maybe not because it's a right-trending county, but I mean, this is probably about what we're going to be seeing in November at the very least. Okay, Troy Jackson has yes, race is projected to go to ranked choice voting. Not surprised in the very least. Oh. There, first round. We do not have any numbers yet for the first round, and has officially been projected to go to RCV. Not surprised in the very least. Troy Jackson's actually doing pretty well up in the northern part of the state, it appears. These more, typically Republican-friendly areas, but then down here, it's basically like anybody's game. And so, from what we've seen there, it's not anything surprising as far as that goes. So, let's see. Who doesn't have governorship elections? You don't have governors. You. Yeah. Boom, boom, boom. I believe that's it. Utah. Yes, there we go. Okay, let's just keep going through these just for funsies. Just because we literally have, like, nothing else to do here. New Hampshire. I mean, this is going to be a redder environment than even 2024 was, because it's going to probably end up having a Republican governor at the end of the night. So at the very least, you're probably going to have those. Rockingham's probably going to end up being relatively strong, because Kelly Ayotte's not going to, blow it out of the water by any absurd amount, right? Probably about 7 points, which isn't insane. But I mean, it's definitely not bad either. Harris won it by 2 3/4. It's going to be about a 9-point shift. So right about a safe margin or so might be able to pull that over. But I mean, Sullivan and Carroll, both of those are actually right about stagnant. So I wouldn't be surprised if they basically stay put in respect to the rest of the state. And then you have these two, Hillsborough, which I believe actually voted for Trump in 2016. Another one of those is kind of staying put. Cheshire, almost certainly going to end up voting lean at the very least. Then you have Stratford. Grafton's probably going to end up voting safe, but Stratford is barely hanging on to a safe margin in the first place. Then you have Phil Scott, who's going to probably win like every single county in Vermont. He just does whatever he wants. He's a Republican there, very moderate there, and he's even going to win Chittenden, which is by far where the largest amount of Democrats are there. And yeah, actually, Trump got Orleans County, which he did not in 2016. That's going to be one of those. It's going to be interesting for them to potentially see if they're going to be able to get there. Shove this up here. Still nothing. Let me see. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, Chittenden, he won by over 40. So, yeah, it's not even close. Wyndham's actually the closest. Interesting. But yeah, all of these are probably not going safe, maybe except for, like, Bristol. And then maybe Plymouth. I'm not 100% sure, but other than that, yeah, probably these guys are probably going to end up being relatively safe. That Vermont, pretty strong candidate there. I'm not necessarily expecting anything absurd from him there. Maybe, like, I mean, Litchfield and Wyndham aren't necessarily the name of the counties anymore. So now they changed them. Counties don't exist in Connecticut anymore. They actually axed it, and now they're all managed at the state level. But something like that necessarily not too surprising for what we have there. Oh, New Haven. Then you have Rhode Island, where we probably are going to end up having something like this, maybe for the general election. It doesn't necessarily matter whether it's not Raimondo. Where's Raimondo from? Where you have, doesn't matter if it ends up being McKee, who's really struggling to prove rating or not. It's Rhode Island this cycle, not really going to matter too much. You end up having these city counties are going to easily be Democratic, and then you end up having Richmond County be Republican. Nothing insane as far as that goes there. You have probably Rockland County, which shifted very hard. That's a 12-point shift. Potentially coming back, not necessarily as strong as it did. No, actually going to be like that. I forgot how it worked. Did it backwards. Nassau County. Nassau County is where the nominee is from, so it's probably not going to be as strong to the left, but I do think that, honestly, she's probably going to win by, like, 15 points, Kathy Hochul. So a little bit to the left of where it was, so maybe actually Republicans end up squeaking out a win in Nassau County, just because of the very fact that it is going to end up being a Nassau County executive who is, in fact, actually winning the nomination there, and so... And look up at Suffolk, probably going to be the same sort of thing there. Probably going to end up saying likely. It's a very left-trending area. Again, you have, like I said, I know a good bit about New York, right? Like, these are very affluent white voters. Then you go over to Putnam County, probably going to drop below a safe margin there. Orange County, potentially going to go down lean. And then you got, oops. These three. Yeah, these are safe for the Democrats. Duchess is going to end up being likely. These guys as well. Saratoga, Shansaler probably end up being something like lean. You got the northern New York area, which used to be very Democratic, and I think that at this point it's almost certainly gone for them, almost like completely. I mean, it's completely gone in the Trump era. I mean, I'm pretty sure Obama won like all 4 of those. Yep, by a safe margin too. Now they're just gone. Harris only won Essex County by 96 votes. Then you have Hamilton. You got a lot more up in the northern New York area that really is just gone at this point. 21 points in that one. That's gone. Warren County. It's going to be a little bit interesting to see how that goes. Depends on how close the contest ends up going, just in general. I'm just going through here. Otsego probably going to be a little bit closer. I don't know what cities in there, but you end up having something like that there. 13 is probably going to drop below a 12-point margin in Madison County. Then you have down there, these are probably all going to end up being safe. Maybe not in that 12, those two 16-point margin counties. Oop, that's Tompkins. That is a very safe blue county. I'm pretty sure it's a very heavy black majority county there in Tompkins. I don't think there's even like any huge city there or anything. It's just like, I'm not 100% sure. Niagara is probably going to end up being a likely margin. It was only a likely margin against Biden. 21 points there. You're looking at another safe margin in those guys. Cayuga is going to certainly drop down a bit. Seneca is not going to drop below anything less than that, though. You end up with Yates probably going to end up being pretty strong. And then you have Ontario County, which actually is a left-trending county, it appears. Pretty strongly so. Yeah, wow, look at that. Pretty strongly so. Potentially going to actually give a Hochul a pretty good margin there. Now, this is going to be fun. Pennsylvania. Very, very strong margin for Josh Shapiro expected here, where we have the fact of, yeah, really nothing's coming in still. 9:47, we are down to 12 minutes before the polls close in Nevada, which is the final state that we are waiting on. So still, a majority of counties, they were not sure going to go Republican, but we actually still have a lot left. So obviously these guys are all actually going to end up going safe for Josh Shapiro. And these include counties that actually voted for Donald Trump. We're talking Bucks, Northampton, Monroe, Erie, all of those going safe. Because, I mean, we're talking like a 17-point margin for Shapiro. Trump won Pennsylvania by 1 3/4 points. So that is already just like an 18-point shift, right? 18-point shift. Cumberland is almost safe, right? Like, it probably will be, just from the shift expected at the top of the ticket. It's trending to the left. It's actually one of the one of the counties that actually voted 10.6 for Trump and then 9.4. It actually shifted straight up to the left from 2020 to 2024. It is a very rapidly growing area, very rapidly growing county, part of the Harrisburg suburbs, which are very quickly growing, basically as part of like almost an extension of the DC suburbs, which are insanely growing in this area. It's absurd how big the DC suburbs and exurbs growth is. It's actually one of the reasons that Berkeley and Jefferson County are the only two growing counties in West Virginia, other than Monongalia, which has the state college in it. And so now we're also looking at places like, Westmoreland, Washington, probably dropping down a good bit. I mean, like, we're talking like 16 points to the left statewide. So, I mean, more than that, right? Beaver, he won Beaver last time. I'd be surprised if he didn't actually end up pulling it off again this time. Butler's a little bit more Republican friendly, so that's going to be a little bit more difficult. But we're talking like potentially Montour, potentially getting a little bit closer, Union, right? These counties that are sitting about like right about a 20-point margin, right? A lot of those went for Trump by about 20 points. Luzerne, he managed to narrowly squeak out a victory last time. I wouldn't be surprised if he pulls out a victory this time. Looking at Lancaster, he narrowly lost it last time to crap. If we like an 18-point margin, then yeah, that would narrowly end up being like a tilt. He narrowly lost Mastriano, Doug Mastriano. And so yeah, we're talking. I mean, this is like a little bit of a lefty area there. Yeah, that could probably end up dropping down to like a lean. You end up having Columbia, which is probably going to be like a little bit under 12 points, right? Because eventually you get to a point where Philadelphia is only going to shift so hard. So then if you're continuing to move, then somewhere has to budge. And it's going to be basically everywhere else. It's going to be these exurban areas. It's going to be these, deeper suburban areas, right? That's what's going to actually start shifting. York is probably going to drop down below a safe margin. You're going to have him winning Berks again, probably by like even a likely margin. So here's something more along the lines that you might end up seeing in Pennsylvania, potentially even bringing back the old coalition back, right? 1996, Clinton won all three of these counties by a safe margin, even won Westmoreland. He actually won all 6 of these by a safe margin back in 92. And you can see, that Carter, even Mondale won them all. Dukakis, Clinton in 92 was the strength of the Southwestern coalition. And then 96, you can see it start shrinking from there, and it has not recovered. And so you can potentially see some of that reversion in an election like this, where you end up having a really strong show out there. Potentially Mercer County dropping down a little bit there, just below 12 points as well. But this is probably about where you're going to be getting. Carbon County, I mean, looking at 34 points. Again, it voted for Obama in 08, so not necessarily sure that that's going to be anything, worth looking into to that point exactly. But Maryland, nothing super surprising as far as that goes. I mean, we're looking at like pretty blue down the Baltimore DC corridor. And so then you're looking at, Frederick County probably potentially going safe, because I mean, Harris only went by 28.5. So you're looking at a 32-point margin. You're probably going to end up getting enough to narrowly squeak out a safe victory in that area, and maybe bring down some other counties that narrowly, voted safe and now they're not going to, or something like that. And so Kent County is probably going to come back. You're probably going to get Talbot. You're probably potentially even going to get Wicomico, depending on how strong of a year you're looking at. And so you're going to end up with some relatively strong numbers as far as that goes. Somerset, probably not so much, but Dorchester might drop down to a likely margin. Depends on how weak you end up getting there. Ohio is another one of the ones where I'm pretty proficient, as I showed here. Pretty darn proficient in Ohio politics here, specifically with like specific maps and such. Looking again, we're going to start off with obviously all of them being safe. But in the big vote sink counties, Cuyahoga, Franklin, and Hamilton counties, you also have Lucas, you have Athens, you now have Summit County, which is a pretty big one as well. Lorraine is one that actually Democrats used to be able to depend on, but now has actually shifted hard against them. Democrats need to get that back in order to be able to win the statewide, right? Clinton actually narrowly won it in 2016 and actually flipped to Trump in 2024. And then 2020, and then 2024, it voted even more for Trump. So Democrats need to get this back to at least some degree. The stronger, the better. It is a relatively large county right outside of Cuyahoga County, I'm not necessarily sure what the demographics are that it's shifting that hard to the right. It's probably more of that working class reversion that we've been seeing in multiple states across, especially across like the Rust Belt and such. But then you have and you also talk working class, and you talk about like southeastern Ohio along the Ohio River. I mean, like, look at that. Like, that's one of the few areas that Obama actually did better in 2012 and 2008, and it was completely gone in 2016. Then you also have Wood County. This is another one of the ones that's going to have to go pretty well for Democrats. You're looking up at Lake and Erie counties. Those are pretty close. You're going to probably need Mahoning County back. I mean, maybe not to like an absurd amount. That's probably one of the ones that's going to actually still need to stay, though. And while you're talking about that, you're probably going to need like these guys to be pretty close, right? You're talking Galga, maybe not Ashtabula as much, but you know, you need some of this reversion in the northeastern block, right? Sherrod Brown did pretty well there, right? Ottawa County, I mean, maybe not like absurd numbers, but you know, something a little bit closer to attainable there. Delaware is probably going to end up going blue. It's you know, a very left-trending county. It's suburbanite. It's that level as far as that goes. Same sort of thing with Fairfield. I'm pretty sure there's a growing exurb in there that might end up dropping a little bit, and then Montgomery is probably going to go pretty strongly for the Democrats there. Again, that has Dayton, Ohio in it. And then you also kind of have the same sort of story in Greene, which is probably actually not even going to vote safe this cycle. So we're looking down at all of that, and so next is going to be a Michigan actually got a lot easier now that there's no independent there. County margins are going to get a lot easier there. So Michigan 1.4, I think honestly is going to be close to almost like a 5-point margin for the Democrats there. I mean 1.1%. I think this was without the update that she's no longer there. So like probably solid 3.5 points. I mean, she's a strong candidate, and it's Michigan in a midterm. I wouldn't be surprised if, like John James is probably doomed at this point. I wouldn't be surprised if she wins by almost a safe margin. But as of right now, I'd say probably about 4.5 point margin, which is a 6-point shift to the left from where it was. And so you have some more areas that are somewhat, excuse me, dependent on, some down here in Southeast. You have Wayne, Washtenaw, Oakland. Genesee, probably going to be having to be a likely margin. I forget exactly where that is. That has Flint, Michigan in it. Kent County has, I forget what city in it. Then over here you have Muskegon County. That's going to end up having to shift over to the Democrats a good bit there. You have Kalamazoo and Ingham. Those are kind of like more, just important counties as far as that goes. You really need a larger margin out of Marquette again. And then Leelanau is very fastly moving to the left. Same thing with the counties around it. Honestly, I think that they might end up actually being pretty strong for the Democrats this cycle, showing out pretty strong there. You have a lot of movement across the panhandle as well. Towards the Democratic Party. Not enough necessarily to make too big of a difference. I mean, Keweenaw, for example, is probably going to be a relatively interesting county to watch, but other than that, I'm not necessarily sure they're going to have like any sharp 5-point shifts. But yeah, this general area is going to be an interesting area to watch as they continue to move to the left pretty quickly. On that case, Bay County is another one that's going to be pretty good there. And so that's not breaking news, NYT. That happened like a while ago. They just sent me an email saying that Nancy Mace, whatever. Saginaw probably going to end up coming back to the Democrats. This is one of them that's one of two counties that flipped to Trump. And then Macomb probably going to end up dropping. That's an old Democratic county. That's actually the home of the Reagan Democrat. And so now, it's just a Republican strong county because the working class has permanently moved to the Republican Party. And so that's going to end up being an important point to showcase as far as that goes there. And we're now down to just a minute 52 left until the polls close. You know, so I'm going to wait to do Wisconsin for another minute or so. For the polls to close in the state of Nevada, we have the primary for Nevada governor, where we strongly expect Aaron Ford to win the election there. And then the second House district, where the winner of this will take the place of Amadei, who is retiring this cycle. Democrats are hoping to pick up the fourth Senate seat, this fourth House seat in Nevada this year, as they hold all the other three. This is the Republican vote sink district, but it is possible that they may pick up this one as well later this year with the blue enough environment. It's going to be very interesting to see how things end up going there, if they can actually end up pulling it off. That would be pretty surprising. But it is absolutely not impossible by any metric. This would be the first time ever that Democrats held 4 districts in Nevada, and actually the first time any party held 4, because it has only had 4 since the 2010 census. Now, down to just 30 seconds before the polls close in the state of Nevada, one of 3 states that polls close right now, and the only one that actually has anything happening tonight. But again, the polls are closing in just 20 seconds at 10 p.m. Eastern. This is the last poll closings of the night, and then we're done. So that is going to be it for the cycle tonight. The polls close right now. There is nothing to project, but the polls have just closed in the state of Nevada, where we are awaiting results specifically to confirm that Aaron Ford will be the nominee for governor. Joe Lombardo will easily be the nominee for Republicans. He is the incumbent governor there. That is basically a projection already. But we'll have to see how primary turnout happens, because if Democrats turn out enough more than Republicans, that could potentially show they're on the path to strength later this year. So, again, that is the final poll closing of the night. We are now just awaiting results, and we still have a lot left out of Maine, whose polls closed an hour ago now. And Maine governor for the Democrats has already been projected to go to RCV tabulation. It is probably also going to happen for the Republicans. We are only a third in, though, so there's a chance that Robert Charles might be able to break 50%, but likely he will not. Then for the Democrats, it will easily go to RCV, just because, I mean, like, you're sitting at like 25% each. 25, 24, 23, 21. Only 7 for Angus King III, the son of the current senator, which is a little bit surprising, honestly. Let me go look at the nominee for the 2nd Congressional District for the Democrats. I don't know why they never fill this in. We have Paul LePage, unopposed. They're not even counting votes. And so, this race is also projected to go to ranked choice voting. So that is, in fact, going to be another thing. We're going to have to wait multiple days for these results to start coming in, and so it will be a long time. We will not be able to make a projection tonight. The betting markets think that Joe Baldacci is the favorite, but again, they've been wrong plenty of times before, so... Yeah, what about odds? They're all about odds. Yeah, well, they're also wrong about the odds, too, quite a bit of the time, even more so than just that they're wrong in general. So, getting back to where we were here. Wisconsin, one of those Republican states, probably going to go relatively well for the Democrats there. We're looking at probably about a 2.5-point margin. Honestly, yes, we've been talking about potentially the chance of a very liberal candidate potentially being in here for the Democrats, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to ruin it for them by any means. Just because it's a blue enough environment, I think that even if it were to be Francesca Hong, she would still defeat Tom Tiffany. There's 12% undecided, which is probably enough to be able to set it one way or the other, even if you have a scenario of basically anything happening that, you know, it's a blue enough year that I wouldn't be concerned for the Democrats at all. So that's going to end up being the And so now the even with that, just considering the fact that it's a R+3 poll, doesn't necessarily mean that those 12% aren't going to lean towards Hong. They don't want to say it. It's kind of like the reverse because it's taboo because she's so progressive. But they still would in an environment like what we're going to see in November, almost certainly. Milwaukee and Dane obviously are going to go there. You also have Eau Claire and La Crosse. Those are suburban counties off on the western side of the state. You have Rock and Iowa are a little bit close. Oh yeah, I forgot how to forget Menominee. And so then you also have Bayfield. Now Ashland's a little bit weird. I think it might squeak. It's going to squeak below likely because it is a very right trending county. I mean, Biden plus 11 to Harris plus 5. Douglas is going to go above likely, though. That's going to end up staying put. Door County, right, left trending county, probably would end up going by a good bit there. Again, we're looking at probably about a 2.25 point margin there in a Trump plus 8.8 state. So not an absurd overperformance there from anything there, but again, probably looking at maybe like likely there in those two. Those are a little bit right trending, but nothing insane. Green, probably going to go a little bit as far as that goes. Sauk County, probably going to end up coming back to the Democratic Party side there. Columbia, maybe getting a little bit below 2 points. Looking at Vernon County, that's going to be being lean at the very least. Those are probably going to at least drop below safe, but these two are solidly in the Republican column at this point, also along with the band here, just because we saw that shift heavily towards the Democrats the last cycle does not necessarily mean that there's going to stay that way. And so, again, it kind of came back, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to end up being permanent by any metric or stretch of the imagination. You can see probably Brown dropping below that 6-point threshold. Winnebago is not necessarily going to do the same under the 6-point margin there. And then you probably have something similar to just that they're all going to stay the same. Ozaki probably being relatively good as far as that goes. And both of these are probably going to drop below 6 points at that point there. So something like this, probably. You have quite a few counties, again, that are a little bit close-ish. We saw so many of them, quote-unquote, break for Chris Taylor just because so many of them are a lot like Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, where it is a rural-ish county, but it has like an ex-urban and actually growing urban. Now Lancaster is a very quickly growing city center. It's that, but on a smaller scale for a lot of these counties. So you end up having a scenario of that they're all like 20 points for Trump, right? You have a lot of Trump plus 20 counties here. And so any of them could potentially end up breaking a little bit further than expected, but most of it's probably going to be tugged by the cities because they're not absurdly Democratic, right? She's getting 68% out of Milwaukee and 75 out of Dane, right? That's not, I mean, she did explicitly poorly in a lot of the cities. So I'm going to try to point out these. But I mean, 79, and she did badly in Philadelphia, and she got 79, right? That's still more than she got in Dane, and that's way more than she got in Milwaukee. So for those big counties, the fact that she's getting that low of an amount is definitely a bit of a contrast to what happened before. So its rurals are less red, but its cities are less blue too. You're probably going to end up having something like a 16-point margin or so in Illinois. Right here, we're looking probably about a 15.5-point margin. There's probably about 5 points to the left. J.B. Pritzker isn't, anything magical, but he's relatively well-liked amongst the party. He's probably going to do well enough to be able to get a relatively strong showing across the board, probably be able to get all of these guys back to be a more comfortable margin. They actually were a little bit stronger back in 2016. So they are actually a little bit left trending or right trending, which is a little bit weird. But I think it's actually because they're a little bit too urban. Chicago actually kind of bleeds into like Will over here, and that's really what's actually shifting it. And then McHenry probably going to be the same sort of thing there, and then maybe Boone probably dropping down to a likely margin. I'm pretty sure that's where it was. Nope. No. Or was it then 13 to 4? So it's actually a left trending county. Rock Island probably going to end up being safe. This is, I forget where it is, right across from Scott. Got the same city core-ish area there. You have Peoria. You have McLean, right? All of these. Champaign randomly, I have no idea what city's actually sitting there. Knox County potentially dropping down to a lean margin or so, getting down to San German. And then you have places like, Madison County, where it's actually a left trending county, growth of St. Louis, right? Both of Missouri cities are growing quickly, and the bleed over on the other side is also growing pretty quickly. St. Clair, I'm not really sure that's actually growing and shifting left fast enough to really make much of a difference. Then you have Jackson, which might end up being a likely margin, not 100% sure. And then down here, I don't think these are actually going to be close enough. These are ones that used to be pretty Democratic. Again, they're one of the river counties that used to be part of like the core of the Democratic County or Democratic Party, but not really anymore to that same degree. Iowa's interesting. Iowa is interesting. So, again, if you remove these 4 counties, this chunk of Iowa voted Democratic for president each and every time from 2012 going all the way back to 1984. Every single time, right? 2004, Bush won it by a very narrow amount. And actually, if you remove these 4 counties, then actually, I believe if you just remove Sayou County, actually, it looks like, right? 11,790 votes. That's 10,000. Yeah, so if you actually remove Sayou County, so yeah, essentially speaking, that really was an interesting point in 2004. Yeah, we're looking at what coalitions would be important for one candidate or the other, and so Sayou is a very big Republican vote sink. But we're looking at Democratic vote sinks. You have Polk, you have Story, you have all the ones that Harris struggled in. I mean, she even broke down below 12 points in like all of them, which is insane. Black Hawk, you need to really have that go hard to the left, right? Rob Sand narrowly favored. Now we're looking at probably about a 0.5 point margin, maybe close to like a point or so. I could actually see him winning by like 7, just because it's a partisan. Zach Lawn isn't necessarily super strong, so I don't really see anything like as far as that goes. But 1 point or so, it's we saw it in Kansas, right? So that's the same sort of thing that I'm kind of basing that off of. We've seen this before in Kansas, and so there's a chance that might end up actually being a little bit more surprising. But yeah, Iowa potentially 1.1%. That is 14.3 to the left. So looking at like Dallas County, that's probably going to be likely. That's a left trending county in that area. You're looking at Warren, right? That's probably going to be a little bit closer there because you end up having another left trending county, right? 7 points in Boone. Right, you're looking at all of these that are probably going to end up being a lot closer than they currently are, even including some of these ones that, haven't voted blue since Obama. And so where you're looking for all of these counties, this is probably where a lot of seeding is actually going to happen. So maybe some of these that are like hovering. And I mean, there was one that was randomly like only 20 points. Yeah, like Worth County maybe, or Floyd County, maybe it'll drop down a little bit, because the driftless area is really where there's a lot to be gained back for Democrats. There's ancestrally Democratic areas. Woodbury and Pottawatomie obviously are going to be pretty strong for them there. Pottawatomie maybe even getting a little bit closer from Turek, but I'm not 100% sure how that'll fare for him there on his side of the ticket. Jefferson, probably going to be blue on the level there. Des Moines County could really go either way. Not 100% sure as far as that goes. Washington County, and we're looking at like what again, 14 points. So yeah, I mean that's like right there. That'd be 13, 14 points for Muscatine. That's probably going to end up shifting because that's got a urban turnout there. That's going to be about 10 points there. So I mean 7 in Jasper or Cedar Jones. That'd be about 12 points. I mean, you can only get so much out of Johnson, so I think probably just because you need to gain that percentage somewhere, you end up having that drop down in Jones, and so Des Moines would actually probably end up being a tilt blue there. Then you have on the rest of the eastern part of the state, you probably have closer margins in Clinton County, which Hillary Clinton actually lost, flipping against her. You have Jackson County probably going to end up still being relatively safe. Dubuque County, though, is probably going to end up going back to the Democrats. And so you end up having, then this central chunk here. Marshall's probably going to go blue. Right, you have 14, that's like a 13-point margin there, right? And then you have 12, that one's probably going to be a little bit closer, right? Powshake, Benton, Iowa County, 14, that's like 13 points. There's another one of those that Democrats are probably going to do relatively well in, considering it's got another suburban core area sort of thing there. So Iowa, something potentially looking like this. It's going to be saved by the new central exurbs that Democrats are kind of gaining a little bit back in. These areas are kind of a little bit left trending because, that's where they've been gaining at this point, is these somewhat exurban regions as of right now. And so they seem to be doing it. Nevada has literally nothing in. I'm not at all surprised in the least. 73.25% for Graham Plattner right now in the primary. And Baldacci is ahead by, oh my word, yeah, 57 votes, and there's still only a quarter counted. So yeah, I guess they might already be counting. I don't know. This is insane. This is incredibly slow. This is annoying. This is irritating. Yep, this has now been projected to also go to runoff 2 because he also has he's not going to break 50%. So there's that. I'm probably going to wrap up a little bit sooner than I thought I would. Minnesota, kind of getting in here. We're looking at some of these core counties there. Those are the big four for Democrats there. If it weren't for those four, Kamala Harris would easily have lost the state of Minnesota. If we look at these three up on the northeastern chunk here, right, we're looking at Amy Klobuchar here. So she's going to win by an absurd amount, right? We're talking like 16 points. That is a 12-point shift to the left. So any county that Kamala Harris won is easily going to go for her there. Beltrami probably going to end up being like a 7-point margin for the Democrats there. I mean, you're looking at like Monoman probably getting a little bit closer there as well, right? I mean, like 8 points there. You're looking at potentially reduced margins just across the board. I mean, like that'd be down to like a 10-point margin. I mean, she does really well even in the rurals in a lot of places, and so where you're looking for these margins, you're going to be seeing a lot of these places going a lot bluer than they would ever consider for the presidential level, just because it's Amy Klobuchar. And so these are probably going to both end up going blue. That's like Tim Walz's homeland there. Looking at, probably like likely and lean margins for these guys, which are the outer chunks of Minneapolis. They're very quickly flying to the left. Then you have Goodhue County, which is probably going to be pretty close. And I mean, it really depends on who they end up nominating again. It's going to be an interesting contest. Steele, there we go. Steele County is the one that I wanted. But at the very least, it's not going to be 16.5. That's probably going to be a lot closer. And Fillmore. So this is probably somewhere along the lines of Minnesota. I'm probably actually overestimating the Republican in a lot of the rurals, especially these areas, right? Chisago, right? Asante, Shelburne, Wright, LeSueur. But yeah, I mean, this is just really slow, so I'm just going through, basically just county predictions so far for the governorships. Democrats are probably going to do okay in Maine. Pretty brutal in Vermont, but that's Phil Scott. Phil Scott does what Phil Scott wants. Then we have Pennsylvania looking very good for the Democrats, though. Phenomenal map for them there. Good map in Ohio. Iowa looking pretty blue. South Dakota really doesn't matter, though. It's going to end up being a pretty Republican election there in South Dakota. We're looking at probably about a 30-point margin just because it's an incumbency. If Larry Roden doesn't end up winning the runoff or the convention, then I really don't know what happened. But actually about like a point to the right, which really isn't going to do much of anything, honestly. It's just like, oops, wrong one. It's just whatever, right? Most of the population lives in Minnehaha County, which is where the capital is. You end up having Dewey. Potentially have like some shuffling around here, but I'm not 100% sure, honestly. Yeah, that's literally just what a uniform shift would look like there. So really nothing surprising as far as that goes. Nebraska is going to be a little bit interesting. It's a very left-trending state. You have things like, you also have Lynn Walsh there, 18 points. That would be a 2-point shift to the left. There isn't anything huge. Jim Pillen's really struggling with approval rating, and so I'm going to need to look a little bit more into polling here. But Douglas absolutely could end up being a safe margin for Walls, and then you have Lancaster potentially being likely, but you might end up having some more saturated rurals. Especially areas like Thurston, which used to be Democratic strong areas, right? Obama won it both times, and actually Kerry's the one that flipped it. Oh my word. Bush won Lancaster and Douglas by a safe margin. Obama flipped both in 08. Romney flipped them both back in 2012. That's weird. Sarpy County is almost certainly going to be a bit lower of a margin there. And then other than that, like nothing really shows up in Nebraska. It's insane how much heavy lifting these two counties do for the entire state's margin, to the point where like you literally don't see anything else. Like the rest of it is just like 60-point counties where you end up getting like 1,000 votes each. So it really is just dead land out here compared to two urban regions that really just like take the show. They don't control it. There's enough people out here in these areas that, I mean, there's at least 750,000 people because they get their own congressional district, but it's to the point where it's just not enough to really make much of a difference. Kansas is going to be a big one. R+7. That is actually a flip, but that is still 9 points to the left of the 2024 results. So that is going to be enough to end up getting all of these in the bag there. Not necessarily by a safe margin anymore, which did happen for the most recent one there, but that is a 9-point margin. So that is going to end up being what, 4 points. So under 5, that's being 12. It's a left trending area, so I guess it probably ended up being a little bit under that margin. Then you end up with something like this there in Lyon County. You end up having Geary County go by about 8. Crawford probably isn't going to shift by enough. That is one that did pretty well, though. Leavenworth, I'm pretty sure, is a left trending county as well, right? 24.5 to 22.8. I don't really know that the state shifted a little bit, so I don't know exactly how much it trended by itself, and the rest of the state doesn't really have enough to necessarily like point anything out or have any specific interest there. So that's probably about it for Kansas. I'm probably going to cut it at 11 because there's really not going to be anything happening for much longer. We really don't have anything speeding up by any. Narav Shah did take the lead in Maine. So now let me guess. All of a sudden, nope, Hannah Pingree is now favored. That's weird. Well, according to them at least. Hannah Pingree actually also passed Troy Jackson. So Troy Jackson is now 3rd place. There's only a 1/3 of the vote in, though. Still, they are counting very slowly, and they don't have anything yet for the ranked choice voting. And then we're Wyoming. It's just an easy map, right? You just drop in safe blue Tatum County, and then depending on how well things go in Albany, that's how you can tell the margin. There's the entirety of the state of Wyoming. That is literally all they do in Wyoming. It's weird. They're weird. Yeah, but Albany If we're looking at an open seat there in Wyoming, 42 points for the Republicans, looking at a 45, that's about 3 points to the left. So Albany's basically going to be like a complete toss-up. Just because of the national environment, I'm going to give it to the Democrats. Idaho, this is actually a slight improvement from the current one, I believe, 34, 36. No, it's actually 2.5 to the left. I'm pretty sure that not a single margin is better than the 2024 margin just because of how strong the national environment is expected to be for Democrats. And so, having Lotta County is probably going to come back a little bit there. It was actually a Democratic county. It voted for Clinton by 4.6, Biden by 3.7, so very right trending county. So maybe not. You have Blaine County, which is just some weird county in the middle of the state. I don't really know. Tatum County is very left trending. Yeah, wow. Probably easily going to end up being a likely margin there, but nonetheless, it's still going to be basically a very boring map in Washington. Does not actually have an election. I forgot about that one. No. I said disable. No. MD. Thank you. Do not. No, not now. Jeez. Ridiculous. Oregon. You got these guys. You got Multnomah. That's really all that Democrats need in order to really be able to win the state, right? That's 250,000 vote net. They end up having a lot of these guys on the outer portions. The problem for Oregon is that narrowly looking at a safe margin, but that's worse than Kamala Harris's margin there, 12.3%. That's 2 points worse in a bluer environment. So I think this is like the one state that actually has that exception other than Vermont and New Hampshire. And so those are all due to candidates, but it's because of strong Republicans in the two New England states. Here it's because Tina Kotek kind of sucks, and also Oregon doesn't really like its Democratic governors, so it doesn't vote for them by very large margins. Usually, it reluctantly keeps voting for them because at this point it's more or less a one-party state, and so it'll probably end up voting for Kotek. California, probably about a 20-point margin for governor. That's right about where it was. So honestly, I think because of the early vote and whatever, it's probably going to be close to a 25-point margin. About a 5-point shift to the left. So nothing huge necessarily, but that actually is enough to actually have Becerra win the majority of counties here. You can see that he's probably going to pulling these guys back to the Democratic column. Have some Central Cali counties start coming back a little bit. Not enough to necessarily be super impressive and flashy, but it's going to be enough to it's going to be probably enough to maybe make things a little bit more interesting there. Stanislaus, I think, is honestly gone for Democrats at this point, though, just because it is a right-trending county and doesn't necessarily have any, redeeming qualities as far as, oh, yeah, this is probably going to end up going Democratic anytime soon. Then you have Nevada, you have Sierra, Yuba, Sutter, Colusa. These guys all probably going to go Republican. And then you have these guys up in the northern part of the state, which are just completely shut out Republican areas. I mean, you have 17 maybe, or 16 there, but honestly, I'm not 100% certain that those are going to end up being anything really close. Lake County's probably going to flipping back, and then you probably have Butte County as well. Probably end up going to go for Becerra, but honestly, it really is just going to be pretty close to a toss-up as far as that goes. Nevada's going to be interesting because Lombardo is such a big question mark. The early votes are going to be the first big tell, but this is a toss-up Nevada. This is a perfectly tied Nevada, right? Clark County, about 4 points for the Democrats. Washoe, about 2.5. Carson City narrowly safe, and then all these easily safe. So, because a majority of the population lives in Clark County, like 70% of the population of Nevada lives in Clark County, and then like another 20% lives in Carson City area, and then right there in whatever the other little city is. I'm being dumb right now. Still not a single vote in, by the way. Reno. So that's where most of it is. But if he ends up winning, then I think probably something like this. It's really not going to be very interesting of a state. Neither usually is Arizona, where there just really aren't enough counties to really divide things up. Again, like 60% of the state lives in Maricopa County. But if you have a really, really strong year for you could potentially have having like a likely blue Maricopa, which would be a huge win for the Democrats there. That's probably going to end up tugging the state a pretty strong margin, 3.7%. It'd probably be pretty close, like bordering lean and likely at this point. In time, Yuma is more or less gone. It actually only narrowly went to Trump. It shifted really hard to the left and then has trended to the right. Same sort of thing for Navajo. And Cochise basically has actually moved a little bit to the left, but like more or less stagnant. And so that's going to be the main thing there. Hawaii, excuse me, all blue. No real movement there. Yeah, I have no idea why that's its own county. Wonder what that county supervisors board looks like. Probably going to end up being a Republican win in Alaska, but we're at about 6 points there. It's going to be relatively interesting to see how close this may end up getting, but 6-point margin, that is still 19 points to the left, which is actually one of the larger margins of any state from the 2024 margin there. So that is going to be a pretty big point for the Democrats there, specifically if they end up doing really well on the senatorial level in Alaska. That may actually end up helping Tom Begich at the top of the ticket, just from, the 19, that'd be 15. But I mean, this is a slightly left trending state, so it's enough to potentially be, I'd probably end up actually shifting back for a good margin there. Yeah, and I think, oh wow, 19, that would actually flip Fairbanks North Star. Then for the rest here, you have probably like a toss-up Petersburg, areas like Ketron Gateway potentially being like really, really close. And then Wrangell probably still being relatively strong as far as that goes. This area is kind of split. This one's a little bit closer. But I think that one ends up being safe anyway. Copper River is actually relatively close to Southeast Fairbanks in its margin there. It's a very rural 19 that could potentially being like toss-up Denali area. Then you have this, and then you have Kenai Peninsula also being like somewhat like that. Then you have Bristol Bay. Actually, that would be like a likely margin, believe it or not. And then you have that area there and that Luton's East, which is not even going to be that close. So then you go to New Mexico. This is going to be another one that's going to be a little bit interesting. You have, nothing absurd. Probably about like a 10-point margin, which is 4 points to the left of where it was in 2024. And so here, you can see, again, it's probably going to be just a majority red. And you have these big counties there, 4 points to the left. Bernalillo County is the one that has the most votes in it. Sandoval is just big. Bernalillo's where most of the votes are. Specifically for Democrats, they're a huge vote dump in Bernalillo. That's where the capital is, and so that's where Democrats make their races. Grant probably ended up being a little bit close to that one. Hidalgo County actually voted for Obama twice. It's kind of gone for Democrats at this point. 4-point shift really isn't going to be enough to necessarily make anything. Maybe like Valencia, but I don't necessarily think so. And then maybe get scrape back Socorro. Depends on how well things go with Hispanic voters. In November, Colfax would drop below a safe margin as well. Then you end up having Guadalupe probably being a strong number there. And then you have just those safe Republican counties on the outside of the state surrounding areas. So, more or less down to Colorado now. We're just not really much left at this point. And so Colorado, 16 points. Again, still, oh my word, still nothing in yet. Aaron Forgy is going to win. Then you have Joe Baldacci, narrowly favored in poly market, whatever. Ranked choice voting, these are going to take days. So, again, to Colorado, this is probably going to be a relatively strong margin there. 16.4. Harris won the state by 11. That's 5.5 point shift to the left. So, going to help things there. But if you look at these southern counties down here, these are like Hispanic heavy counties. These are actually right trending. So, Democrats probably aren't going to be able to scrape much of this back. Even in a better environment for them at the state level, it's probably not going to end up mattering too much. Maybe you get something back there because that's a little bit more of a strong spot. But there you end up getting like all of these across this band. I don't remember exactly where this goes from here. Yup, yes. Then those 4 total, and you kind of do this. And so there, Garfield. Grand County is probably going to end up flipping. You end up having some that are a little bit close, maybe, but not enough to specifically, like, turn anything there. Probably Hinsdale dropping, and then maybe the one next to it there that was, like, 13 points, but this is probably actually enough that maybe it won't. I'm not 100% sure. It's 14 points, so it'll only take a 2-point shift, so I think maybe it probably would. Los Animas, probably same sort of thing there, just because it's close enough that it's probably going to end up nudging itself a little bit over, but you know, some of those are very Hispanic counties, and they've actually been shifting to the right relatively considerably. It's the few areas that are actually moving to the right in the state of Colorado. Looking next at Oklahoma, really depends on how close this margin ends up being. I could see it being really, really close again. It has been in the past, but probably about 22-point margin, which is still 12 points to the left of where it was. So that would still be a pretty strong Republican margin there, but you're looking probably at like a likely Oklahoma County. For the Democrats there, you're looking at probably a lean Tulsa. You know, Cleveland would be basically toss up as far as that goes. You know, nothing else really. There's a big jump. Yeah, Comanche is at 23, so if it's 12, that'd be like 9. That's down here, right? And then you have Payne at 25, which is a little bit on the edge there on whether or not it would actually shift at all. But, yeah, it's really just going to be a, where's Payne County? But I mean, if you look at the most recent election, you can see here, this is obviously greatly expanded margins here. You have, I believe it's more than 50, 40 to 50, 30 to 40, 20 to 30, 15 to 20, 10 to 15, 5 to 10, less than 5, or something like that. I remember it was something staggered like that. But anyway, if you look at Oklahoma, you can see a lot of this is, oh, there it is. Yep. A lot of it is a lot closer than usual. And you can see that actually the Democrat won Tulsa and Cleveland counties and got pretty close in quite a few other ones. Stitt only won by like 14 points. Then we get on to Texas. This is what it looked like in 2022. And so Texas currently looking at probably like a 7.5-point margin. This is going to be a little bit more complicated. It's about a 6-point shift. But, again, if you have an environment of, you know, where Hispanic voters are coming back, that's going to make things a little bit more interesting, especially along the Rio Grande. But specifically, you have The main vote sinks for Democrats, as always. Those ones. Then you have Harris, which is pretty close. But, if you're looking at 7 points to the left, the Harris is probably going to be being safe at that point in time. You're looking at Presidio, which is a pretty small county along the border there. Zavala and Dimmitt are probably going to end up going back. You probably are going to end up getting Webb at least most of the way back, same sort of thing in Hidalgo, which are more urban. Then you have Wilsey and Cameron potentially coming back. I don't really know about Starr. Starr is probably mostly gone at this point. It is flown itself to the left. These two are probably okay, especially this year, for the Democrats at least. And then you have Zapata is probably gone already at that point. Duval potentially coming back to some extent there. Maverick, probably not any insane amount. It's definitely completely collapsed from where it was in 2016. But yeah, potentially getting some of it back there is going to really be important for Democrats there. Kleberg potentially coming back a good bit. And then you end up getting like Nueces in there as well. Potentially being interesting. Culberson probably coming back at least most of the way. And then you end up getting Fort Bend, which is probably going to be pretty strong. You have the loss of Jefferson. I believe in 2020, actually, it flipped to Trump. No, it flipped away to Trump okay. But yeah, you end up having Hayes County, which is a very left trending county right now, same sort of thing in Williamson. Which are probably going to go really strongly for Talarico, at least. Tarrant looking something like this, potentially like a little bit lean, maybe like tiltish. Collin probably going to be a little bit close, and then Denton getting relatively a bit lower, maybe hovering around 6 points. Finishing up in Arkansas, I think after this I'm probably just going to completely sign off because nobody's doing any counting right now, and it's annoying, and there's really nothing that I'll be able to make anything for other than that Robert Charles will in fact be the nominee, but oh my word, he's down below 40% now. Jonathan Bush is actually catching up a good bit, but honestly I think that based off RCV it's still enough of a lead that Robert Charles might be able to probably will squeak it out. Arkansas, this is currently looking at a 32-point margin, which is a little bit more than Trump won by 1.4%. This is another random one. This is mostly because of incumbency, and honestly, I see nothing necessarily about... I forgot how reduced these margins are now. Sarah Huckabee Sanders that necessarily would make her have any difficult time with being reelected by a relatively large amount. So probably something like this, which is continuing to have losses there along the Mississippi River. Tennessee, 26 points. Trump won by 30, so that's a 4-point shift there. But there's so many counties in Tennessee, and the problem with Tennessee is that there's so many counties that Democrats don't do well in. And so you're probably going to end up with just this again, right? Hamilton, maybe. Nudge. That's, Knox. What's in Hamilton County? I forget. There's a city there that's been growing, and it's actually been turning to the left, but that's it. Then you go to Alabama. This is actually going to be really interesting because you have the competitive election there down to 16 points. That's a 14-point shift to the left. This is Doug Jones, former senator of the state. And so you're looking probably at a very strong return of the black belt in this area. And so maybe 16 points to the left is going to be more than enough to get like all of these completely into his column, probably even get like Macon County by a strong amount. 16 could potentially even get Mobile. You get, a bit closer. He's going to do really well with the minority vote, so that's really why it's going to end up being in these areas specifically that are in fact going to flip to him. 16 points. You're going to be getting a little bit closer in areas like Chambers County as well. You're looking at like Lee dropping down. I always forget about Wilcox actually being in that region there. Tuscaloosa probably getting a good bit further down, right? 16 points. You're looking at a lot of these counties that are right about 20 points that are on the edge of the belt here that would in fact get some bit closer for the for the Democrats there, not just within striking distance, but enough to show up on the map, and so that would be a little bit interesting there. Yeah, that would actually end up being a county that would flip there. It'd be a little bit disconnected though, but that'd probably end up being a flip for the Democrats there, and so that would be a narrow-ish loss there. Republicans gonna probably now lose in Georgia 3 points or so, and so that's gonna be about a 5.25 point shift from where it was. And so obviously not doing too phenomenally well in the state of Georgia anymore. It's expected now, according to, I forget who it was, but had like a D+6 national or generic congressional ballot in the state of Georgia. And so obviously not very good news for for the Republicans. That means they're basically doomed down ballot, especially with John Ossoff. But I mean, even like for governor, they're really not going to have much of a shot. So, 5 points to the left, that means you end up having blue Fayette even on the governorship level, right? You have nothing else really, right? 5 points means that ends up dropping down to 11. So maybe you end up continuing to grow a little bit into the exurb area here, which is generally to be expected from continued trends across the country. But you have, a little bit of the return of the black belt had some weaknesses in 2024. Black turnout for Democrats was pretty bad. So you end up getting a little bit more in some of these areas here, breaking 6 points in some of these counties again, finally. Again, 5 points means these two will drop, and then probably, maybe get Peach out of the deal, and then, probably secure Bibb still. Maybe get Baldwin out of it, and then you get like a little bit more into these areas here, right? And potentially get, I mean, Burke's a little bit far, but, potentially get a little bit closer. I'm pretty sure that it's actually a right trending area, though. And then you have Dooley, which is probably going to be tilt, and then you have Houston, which is probably like 5 points or so for the Republicans at that point. And so these guys are going to be a little bit closer as well, but not enough to necessarily spell out any disaster for them there. Early County probably going to get a little bit closer, and you have that guy out blue too. And then these two aren't necessarily close. It's like 13. So then you go to South Carolina. This is the one that we're talking about. There's another primary election tonight where for the governorship, we specifically now have for Governor Pamela Yvette versus Alan Wilson. Both betting markets have Pamela Yvette from 75 to 80% chance of winning. It's not necessarily a, anything crazy, but, yeah. Again, these are the big ones on the western part of the state that really, are like heavy lifters for the Republicans there. 11.5 point margin. That's 6.4 to the left of where it was in 2024. And so we're looking now at, like some safe margins in some of these central parts of the state, specifically like Charleston County getting Hampton back. Jasper's a pretty left trending county or right trending county, but I think they might be able to pick it up if they end up being able to do that well statewide. A lot of these counties are actually flying away from the Democrats at this point in time. And I think, honestly, some of these counties right along here are probably about done. But, you got some of these that are probably going to end up dropping down again if you end up overperforming by those amounts. Again, where you're looking at potentially like getting a little bit closer in some of these areas. I mean, Barnwell, 15.5 as well. So you got a few that are a little bit close. Calhoun, right? Another one there. Looking at Clarendon, almost. That was absolutely a likely. Oh wow, it actually flipped against Biden. But yeah, look at Chester, right? It's a lot of this stuff's down in the south, and again, this is because of the Black Belt. You can look at that continuation there. And of course, Horry County is not at all part of it. Georgetown maybe a little bit less, but yeah, Horry County is its own thing. It is a very white, affluent area there. McCormick randomly is part of a mini city over there. Greenville It depends on how strong of a shift it is. Again, I believe that's like 6 points. So, yeah, that would be 16, so not enough. And then you finally go to Florida, where we're probably looking at maybe like a 6-point overperformance as well in the state of Florida, 5.8%. So that is, in fact, actually going to be an 8-point overperformance. I honestly think Miami-Dade is probably going to come back for the Democrats, not as by a huge amount, but enough to flip back. Now, the rest of the state, not necessarily as much, like Seminole, maybe not as much or whatever, right? We're going to be looking something like 2020's map, except plus you get a little bit more of the white vote in the northern panhandle. Right? You end up getting these guys still. They're still very strong. One way or the other. Duval, 8-point overperformance, probably going to do pretty well. Hillsborough, probably doing okay. Same thing in Pinellas. I mean, Osceola maybe getting likely, maybe not in Seminole. And then you got some interesting stuff going on here when you get an 8-point overperformance there. St. Lucie getting a little bit closer, right? 8-point overperformance. I mean, there's going to be about a 10-point margin in Monroe. And then you end up getting like stuff like Sarasota a little bit closer. The oldest order populations trend to the left a little bit. And then you get some stuff like Brevard maybe dropping down a bit. You get Polk dropping down a bit. You get, it's 8 points. So you start, that would be 13. Right, that'd be 12. So right about on that edge there, potentially maybe going, maybe not. Really depends on how good of a night David Jolly has, specifically in his own contest. Not as much tied to everything else. You end up getting Jefferson back a little bit. And then over here, potentially picking up sneaking down in Escambia, left trending area there. And so that's going to be everything. 1777 Republican counties. So, I mean, again, this is very preliminary. I literally just tossed it together over the course of like the past hour here. Not really much scientificness put into it. But yeah, this is essentially what we might be looking at later in the year for governor. And so as of current projections, I mean, we're looking at, again, not too much happening at this point. Delete that. And so, I mean, again, governor, definitely both going to ranked choice voting. At this point, pretty disappointing. 74% in for the Republicans. And we're looking at 44,000 votes, 45,000 votes, 84,000 for the Democrats. So Democrats blew Republicans out of the water with turnout in Maine. And so that is potentially going to hurt them a lot later. That generic congressional ballot, that by itself might be enough to actually kill on the Senate level. Because if you look at this, 84,700 votes. All right, they're not reporting any here. So Susan Collins is the winner by default. And so that, yeah, they're not even reporting any votes. Eventually, we'll be able to see what it looks like, even though they are unopposed. But that is going to be it. And so that is also going to be everything for tonight. There's not really much going to happen now. I could sit here for a long time, and Nevada's just going to sit there and take its time. Nothing is going to happen. Yep, nothing has reported yet. I'm not surprised, even though the polls have been closed for an hour. So that is going to be it for tonight. Thank you all so much for watching, who came out, and have a fantastic rest of your night. Good night, everybody.